At around 4 p.m. on Friday, April 15, 2011, in Lorgues, France, 27-year-old Alexandre Deromme was on his way home when he received a call from his younger sister, Séverine. She was a high school student, and the siblings had a close relationship, often calling each other. However, today she called not to share good news or weekend plans. Instead, she informed him that their mother, Colette, had not picked her up after school as she usually did. The day before, Séverine had been with their father, who had taken her to school in the morning. She had tried calling their mother multiple times, but her calls went unanswered. This was unusual because their mother was normally very responsible, and there was no reason for her not to come and pick up her daughter. Séverine was worried that something might have happened, such as an accident. She advised Alexandre to check the situation and visit their mother's house. Alexandre was also worried, so he called his mother several times, but received no response. Finally, he decided to visit his mother's house himself. When Alexandre arrived, Séverine was already there, but she was still very anxious, even more than before. She was in the house with the gendarmes, and what they discovered was very concerning. Colette's car was parked in the driveway, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. 52-year-old Colette had vanished without a trace. The keys to the house were also in the car, so Alexandre took them and went inside to see what was happening. The house was completely empty, as if she had simply disappeared. The gendarmes quickly began their search for Colette since the situation was becoming increasingly alarming. Initially, they suspected a robbery, but they found that nothing was stolen from the house. The doors and windows were untouched. In the back seat of the car, they discovered Colette's purse, which held all her identification, bank cards, and cash. She could not have left willingly without those items. Tension heightened. Even after 3 hours of searching, there was still no news. Both the house and the car were thoroughly examined, but no leads emerged. As a result, the search area was expanded to include the outskirts of the town. None of the neighbors had seen anything out of the ordinary, no suspicious noises or activity near Colette's home. To learn more about her, the police interviewed her relatives. Colette, a divorced mother of 4, was known for her reserved and calm demeanor. She was not someone who would spontaneously disappear. She had no mental health issues or addictions. At the time, Colette was working as a supermarket manager. She was polite, punctual, and a devoted mother. Everyone who knew her was confused and did not understand what had happened, as she had no troubling relationships and no history of violence. The evidence suggested that Colette's disappearance was not accidental. The police believed that whoever was involved in this incident was someone she was very familiar with. At the very least, Colette had allowed this person into her house or had given them the right to enter. After investigating, the police identified the primary suspect. She lived by herself in a small 2-story house. To save on expenses, she rented the first floor to a man named Bernard. During his interview, Bernard made some strange and unsettling remarks. He speculated on how Colette might have been abducted, suggesting that she could have been struck on the back of the head, rendering her unable to call for help. He also provided a detailed account of her medical condition, noting that she was diabetic and needed urgent assistance to avoid serious health consequences. His level of knowledge about Colette raised suspicions among the police. Furthermore, Colette's son, Alexandre, revealed that Bernard was in love with his mother, which could explain his insight into her behavior and routines. This revelation increased suspicions, as Bernard could potentially have a motive. Alexandre noted that, despite Bernard's interest, his mother did not reciprocate and had no intention of developing anything beyond friendship. She was solely focused on her children and her work, completely dismissing the idea of a romantic relationship with Bernard. When detectives investigated Bernard's background, they found that he had a criminal history. In 1999, he assaulted his girlfriend with a weapon after she tried to end their relationship. His ex described him as very hot-tempered and unable to control his rage. As a result of these incidents, suspicions about Bernard increased. Colette's lack of interest may have caused him to become angry, and what happened next remains unclear. In 1999, Bernard received a brief 6-year prison sentence for an attack, mainly because the girl he attacked survived. Now, he was called to the police station for questioning as the primary suspect in Colette's disappearance. The police were trying to determine when Colette went missing, and Bernard claimed to have useful information. He reported that on the afternoon of April 14, 2011, while watching television, he heard noises coming from the second floor, where Colette had lived. He could hear footsteps on the wooden floor, but then everything went quiet. He did not see Colette leave, making it likely that he was the last person to have seen her. However, the police were concerned about Bernard's behavior. He was unable to recall the exact time of the noises or even remember what show he was watching, raising further suspicions. Bernard's main problem was that he didn't have a verifiable alibi. However, there was no evidence against him, so the police had to let him go. The next morning, officers came to inspect his house. Bernard greeted them with shouts and was initially unwilling to let them enter. Eventually, he agreed to show them around the first floor of the rented property but continued to make odd comments. Notably, he pointed out a hatch that led to the basement. He remarked that if he had killed someone, he would have hidden the body there, yet he insisted he was innocent and claimed the basement was empty. Upon inspection, there was indeed no one there. Meanwhile, when law enforcement searched Colette's home, they discovered suspicious stains believed to be washed blood, but this could not be confirmed. Despite the lack of evidence, suspicion remained around Bernard. Deciding to keep a close watch on him, the detectives sought to establish the exact time of Colette's disappearance, but clues were scarce. She had been alone for several days with minimal contact with her neighbor until April 15th. Anything could have happened during that time. Investigators began to piece together her movements, partly based on Bernard's statement that he had heard loud noises from the floor above on April 14th, the day before she vanished. As the investigators looked into the case, they realized that no one had seen Colette since April 15th. They managed to locate her friend, who stated that he had last seen Colette on April 14th around 3:30 p.m. at a gathering with mutual friends. He mentioned that after leaving the party, she got into her car intending to drive to Draguignan but planned to stop at home first. This was the only information available and was considered a starting point for the investigation, as more than 40 hours had passed since she went missing. Communicating with Colette's friend helped them determine a rough timeline for when she went missing. In her car, investigators found not only her personal belongings but also her mobile phone. They began analyzing the phone to see whom Colette had communicated with in the hours leading up to her disappearance. Notably, there was a call that lasted about 40 seconds, made shortly before 3:30 p.m. The call was from Sylviane Fabre, Colette's ex-husband's sister. Sylviane was contacted, and she stated that she had met Colette during Colette's marriage to her brother. At that time, Colette's relationship with her husband was not very good, so they decided to separate. However, afterward, the former spouses and their families managed to maintain friendly relations. Sylviane mentioned that back in 2008, they collaborated with Colette to invest money in a joint business. Shortly before Colette's disappearance, the business partners had a small conflict regarding these assets, but Sylviane claimed that everything was resolved, and they continued to work together. Together, Sylviane and Colette created a real estate company that generated a substantial income, which provided Sylviane with a potential motive. Not only were they distant relatives, but they also had shared finances and property, which can often lead to such conflicts. Naturally, Sylviane denied any wrongdoing. Colette's daughter mentioned that Sylviane often had conflicts regarding their joint activities. They could argue and reconcile several times a day. However, Colette's daughter described all these disputes as minor issues that were resolved quickly. The gendarmes checked Sylviane's schedule for the last few days. She had an alibi confirmed by her son. For almost the entire duration of the investigation, suspicions against Sylviane were not substantiated, and the search operation again hit a dead end. On April 17, 2011, the prosecutor's office began a judicial investigation into the disappearance of Colette. With no leads left and all suspicious individuals cleared as unlikely suspects, there was no option but to notify the media and hope, with their assistance, to obtain new witnesses who might have noticed something. At a recent press conference, officials announced that while there were priority leads in the criminal investigation, no suspects had been identified. This news sparked significant interest among journalists, as the case could potentially involve themes of business, money, love, or betrayal. Consequently, rumors began circulating about Colette immediately, some of which were quite alarming. Her information, background, and photos quickly became prominent in newspapers and on television. Her children expressed their desire to see her again and shared how difficult her absence was for them. The most concerning aspect was that the critical 48-hour window for finding her alive had already passed, significantly diminishing the chances of a successful rescue. While the prosecutor's office hoped to gather new leads from the public through the media, the police were actively searching the nearby villages. Following the press conference, the search area was widened, and a special investigative unit took over the case. Colette's disappearance began to attract national attention. The media frenzy intensified as they attempted to connect her case with another notorious crime that had recently shaken France. A few days before Colette went missing in early April 2011, 5 members of the Dupont de Ligonnès family, including the wife and 4 children, were found murdered under the terrace of their home in Nantes. The head of the family, Xavier, disappeared shortly after the murders, having been spotted on the outskirts of the city on April 15. Authorities believe Xavier was responsible for the crime, and he was placed on a nationwide wanted list. Notably, the location of the massacre was only 30 kilometers from Colette's home. The media quickly linked these incidents together. The timing coincided with Colette's likely disappearance, raising the possibility that Xavier kidnapped her. An even stranger coincidence was that the Dupont de Ligonnès family lived in a house that Colette had sold in 1992. Xavier was viewed as a respectable citizen, a devoted husband, and a caring father who was engaged in his community and known for his honesty and fairness. However, it later emerged that Xavier was deep in debt at the time he murdered his family. Just days before the killings, he purchased cement, tools, and 4 bags of lime, suggesting he had a motive and was preparing for the crime. Journalists speculated that Xavier may have had a grudge against Colette, but the reason for his potential revenge remained unclear. Rumors spread quickly, with theories ranging from a fraudulent real estate deal to unrequited love. Others suspected it could be part of a planned escape. Xavier could have taken Colette so they could be together again. Witnesses came forward, claiming they had seen Xavier's car near her home. Some even reported seeing him stop in town on April 14th. Although these accounts seemed unlikely, detectives noticed clear connections between Xavier and Colette. This led them to investigate the possibility that the two had escaped together. Consequently, Colette shifted from being seen as a victim to potentially being viewed as an accomplice in crimes that might have involved Xavier's family. However, friends and family of Colette quickly disputed this theory, asserting that she was not capable of cruelty. As detectives explored new leads that emerged almost daily, they became convinced that there was no romantic or conspiratorial link between Xavier and Colette. They began to feel that the similarities between Xavier and Colette were merely coincidental or tragic coincidences. To definitively eliminate this theory, they decided to examine both Xavier's and Colette's mobile phones. They encountered a challenge. Xavier's phone could not be tracked, and there were no calls or messages from Colette's phone to his. After their investigation, they found no evidence of any contact between the two after the sale of the house. Although the theory regarding Xavier was intriguing, it ultimately consumed valuable police time and resources. 3 weeks after Colette's disappearance, any possible link to Xavier was dismissed. Xavier himself was never found, leaving the French police at an impasse. The case has reached a dead end and will not make any progress until at least May 15, 2011. On this day, about 30 kilometers from Lorgues, 2 tourists were returning from a forest hike and taking photos. While using a remote path to capture some scenic shots, they were hit by a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the side of the path. One of the tourists decided to investigate the source of the odor. As the woman approached a pile of stones, the smell intensified and became unbearable. When she moved one of the stones, she discovered a leg protruding from beneath the rocks. The tourists quickly called the police. Within minutes, Gendarmes arrived at the location and found the body of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine her gender. Only her clothing provided a clue. The police attempted to identify the victim but were initially unsuccessful. They took photographs of her clothes, accessories, and jewelry, which were then shown to the families of various women who had gone missing in the area. Among those families were the children of Colette. Her daughter and son recognized their mother based on what she was wearing. Although the gendarmes believed they had identified Colette a month after her disappearance, they chose to wait for more conclusive evidence. DNA analysis was necessary to confirm family ties, as appearance alone could not provide definitive proof. Ultimately, the examination verified the police's suspicions. The body was indeed identified as Colette Deromme. On May 17, 2011, an autopsy was conducted on the body that had been found at the Forensic Medical Institute. Unfortunately, the condition of the remains was so poor that the exact cause of death could not be determined. The forensic expert did confirm that Colette had not been abused before her death, but it did not help the police make much progress in the case. As a result, the investigation into her disappearance shifted focus to a murder investigation. On June 9, 2011, Colette's body was buried. Law enforcement officers attended the funeral, knowing that criminals sometimes show up at such events to witness the impact of their actions. Some may seek to relive their emotions, while others might derive satisfaction from seeing the grief of the victim's family. Several officers remained in vehicles, while others blended in with the attendees, discreetly observing the proceedings. During this time, the police noted that Séverine, Colette's business partner and sister-in-law, was missing from the funeral. Although Séverine and Colette were close, Séverine's absence raised suspicions. This concern increased a few days later when Séverine attempted to end her life. Although she survived with minor injuries and poisoning, her actions were alarming. When the police arrived after a call from Séverine's neighbor, they found Séverine lying on her couch at home. She was unable to fully express herself, so she was taken to a medical center for assistance. However, the officers did not leave empty-handed. They discovered a lengthy letter addressed to her son, David Betrayal, which was several pages long. While the letter did not contain explicit confessions regarding her actions concerning Colette, the detectives interpreted it as a potential admission of guilt prior to her death. The police decided to speak with David, and he provided new insights into the troubled relationship between Séverine and Colette. He believed that shortly before Colette's death, she and Séverine had experienced a serious conflict related to their shared business. Intrigued, the detectives asked David to recount his activities on April 14th. He described the daytime as uneventful, but his account of the evening was much more compelling. On April 14th, at around 10 p.m., Séverine asked David to drive her to Colette's house to discuss some important business matters. Her own car was broken, so she turned to him for help. However, on their way, his car also broke down a few kilometers from home. Despite the rain, they decided to walk back instead. He took the car battery with them, and together they returned in an attempt to fix the car. On the night Colette disappeared, this mother and son spent hours in the rain attempting to repair a car left outside the city. The gendarmes suspected that David was trying to create a questionable alibi to explain his absence from home. This suspicion was further fueled by Séverine's initial statement to the detectives, in which she claimed she had spent the previous days at home. It seemed implausible that she could forget such a significant event. When Séverine regained consciousness in the medical center, her account of the events changed. Her new story mirrored what her son had previously told, including all the important details. The gendarmes decided to investigate her claims. They found that on the night of April 14th to 15th, there was no rain in the area. Additionally, it was odd that Séverine and her son were unable to flag down a passing car for a ride home. Why did they walk so far while carrying a battery with them? The road's vehicle monitoring system revealed that approximately 5 cars passed by during the time they were walking home. It seemed unlikely that none of these drivers would have stopped to assist them in the rain. This raised suspicions that David and Séverine were hiding something and might be involved in the death of Colette. Unfortunately, there was no physical evidence to support these suspicions. As a result, the decision was made to keep a close watch on them over the next few months. Their phone calls were monitored, and on February 8, 2012, this surveillance yielded important information. The police intercepted a conversation between Séverine and Bernard, who was Colette's neighbor. It became clear that Bernard knew much more than he had initially revealed. On April 14, he not only heard sounds coming from above but also saw Séverine's car arrive at the house, indicating he was aware of her actions. David, Séverine's son, was also involved, as he was driving for his mother. On February 20, 2012, David and Séverine were arrested. Detectives viewed David as the weak link. During questioning, he quickly confessed, seeming relieved to unburden himself of his guilt. He revealed that on April 14, they arrived at Colette's home around 3:30 p.m. Afterward, Séverine lured her into a barn behind the house. A business dispute led to further conflict, during which Séverine attacked Colette, beating her to the ground. Then, she took a rope from the barn and began to strangle Colette in front of David. Although he did not intervene or participate in the attack, he admitted to helping move the body afterward. They left Colette's body on the property, covering it with a tarpaulin. In the evening, when they fabricated the story about the broken car, they took the body out of town. David assisted Séverine in dragging the deceased away from the road and covering her with stones. Despite David's confession, Séverine denied any wrongdoing. She claimed the death was accidental and that they hid the body out of fear of the police. However, it was puzzling how well prepared she seemed for the crime, as she had latex gloves that prevented her from leaving fingerprints. After being detained for 48 hours, Séverine was charged with murder, while David was released. Though he was viewed as an accomplice, his testimony needed verification, so he remained under judicial supervision. The next step was to determine the motive. It turned out that the motive was linked to financial issues. Séverine's business was on the brink of failure when Colette uncovered that Séverine was embezzling money from clients. Another possible motive was jealousy, as Colette was thriving while Séverine's problems continued to grow. Shortly before the tragedy, Séverine had gone through a painful divorce, and one of her two sons had been convicted of violence. Communication between her and David had nearly ceased, and his involvement in the crime marked the end of their close relationship. On January 21, 2014, David was charged in court with the murder of Colette. He claimed that he was only an accomplice and that he helped hide the body due to pressure from his mother. Séverine, his mother, argued that the incident was an act of involuntary manslaughter. She explained that she had lost her temper after a conflict with her business partner, Colette, who was trying to take everything from her. Facing life in prison, Séverine sought to downplay her guilt. The prosecutor's office looked into the role of the tenant, Bernard. Although he witnessed the conflict between Séverine and Colette, he did not report it because he feared Séverine. Ultimately, he testified as a witness for the prosecution. On January 23, 2014, the jury found Séverine Fabre guilty of manslaughter, sentencing her to 30 years in prison. Bernard was acquitted, and David Perel received a 3-year suspended sentence. Over the years, Colette's children struggled to understand what had happened in that barn with their mother. Despite the complicated trial, they felt uncertain that the entire truth had been uncovered. They were unhappy with the court's verdict, believing that Séverine had committed premeditated murder but had received a lenient sentence. Additionally, they felt Bernard was more involved than he had admitted and had evaded responsibility for the crime. The case of Colette Deromme is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many unanswered questions for her family and the community. Colette, a devoted mother, suddenly disappeared, leading to a lengthy investigation filled with suspicions of love, money, and betrayal. Ultimately, the truth was revealed through David's confession and Séverine's sentencing, but was justice truly served? Bernard, the neighbor with a murky past, remains a significant question mark as he evades all charges. For Colette's children, the pain lies not only in losing their mother but also in the feeling that the secrets surrounding their mother's death may be buried forever. Emily Beatriz Azevedo Sena was born in Várzea Grande, a city in the Brazil state of Mato Grosso. She lived with her mother and her stepfather, who became a father figure to her when she was 6. He worked as a radiology technician at Santa Helena Hospital in the nearby city of Cuiabá. The family lived a modest yet close-knit life. Emily was known for her kind nature, calm demeanor. Classmates and neighbors often described her as a gentle person who avoided conflict. At 16, Emily found out she was pregnant, a surprising discovery that she ultimately accepted. The father was a young partner of similar age. Instead of pulling away, he supported her throughout the situation. They started living together and he actively participated in getting ready for the baby's arrival. He went with Emily to doctor visits, assisted with planning, took part in conversations about names and baby items. Despite their youth, her partner demonstrated a strong sense of responsibility, dedication. Although their relationship encountered challenges because of their age, it was characterized as stable, supportive. For Emily, becoming pregnant was a major milestone in her life. She eagerly talked about her future daughter and shared her excitement with family, friends. Her mother and stepfather were very supportive, helping her choose furniture, buy clothes, prepare the nursery. Their home was filled with joy and anticipation. They celebrated the gender reveal twice, once with her partner's relatives and again with Emily's family. Friends remembered how glowing she looked when discussing her journey to motherhood. In another part of Mato Grosso, Natalie Helen Martins Pereira, a 25-year-old married to Christian Albino Cebalho de Arruda, 28, was raising their 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. Natalie worked in public safety, officially employed by the fire department while also taking nursing classes. To others, she seemed organized, responsible. However, beneath this surface, her life was more complicated. Several years ago, Natalie had a medical procedure that tied her fallopian tubes, which prevented her from becoming pregnant naturally. Despite this, she began claiming that she was expecting another child. To support her claims, Natalie created fake medical documents, including ultrasound images, and told others that she was having a baby girl. Christian believed her and shared the news on social media, posted the ultrasound images, even organized a gender reveal party. To make her story seem more convincing, Natalie often posted pictures of herself with what looked like a growing belly or loose clothing and explained her physical appearance as a sign of her impending delivery. In reality, this was all part of a carefully orchestrated and emotionally manipulative lie, a fake pregnancy that relied on fabricated evidence. Natalie not only staged a fake situation but also created an online identity. She joined various online groups for expecting mothers, where she pretended to be a helpful member who often offered items like baby clothes, diapers, and accessories to other moms-to-be. However, there was a catch: the items could only be picked up in person at her house, and the person collecting them had to come alone. This was a deliberate strategy where her online persona was used to make contacts and choose potential targets. No one in Natalie's close circle, neither Christian nor her family, realized that her cheerful demeanor was a meticulously crafted facade. She was intent on making her story a reality, regardless of the consequences. A few weeks before her disappearance, Emily started participating more often in online groups for expecting mothers. She shared her pregnancy thoughts, sought advice, and welcomed support. In one of these forums, she was approached by a user. Her messages were friendly. She offered to donate items for Emily's future daughter, such as clothes, baby blankets, and diapers. This seemed generous, and Emily was genuinely interested. Their conversation soon turned more personal. The user came across as warm and caring, emphasizing her desire to help. When Emily suggested bringing someone with her, like her partner or sister, Natalie became uneasy. She mentioned that her street had many nosy neighbors, and she wanted to avoid attracting any attention. Although her responses were unclear, they didn't raise any major red flags. Emily talked it over with her family and initially decided against going by herself. However, she changed her mind after Natalie offered to send a driver to pick her up, saying the car would be from a ride-sharing service like Uber. On March 12, 2024, around noon, a car came to pick up Emily. However, the driver, as later discovered by investigators, was not affiliated with any ride-sharing service. It was believed that he was either a relative or a friend of Natalie. The car was an ordinary civilian vehicle. Unaware of any potential danger, Emily got in after telling her mother that she would be back soon. She thought the outing would be just a quick trip to collect some donated items before returning home. After more than an hour without any updates from Emily, her mother, Anna Paula Meridian, started to feel anxious. Soon, messages began to come from Emily's phone. However, instead of soothing her worries, the texts only increased her anxiety. Emily claimed she was fine, enjoying a pastry, and would be back soon. Yet, something felt wrong. The language used was strange, overly formal, and didn't match Emily's usual way of writing. Anna quickly realized that someone else must have sent the messages. She attempted to call Emily, but there was no response, and her voice messages went unheard. As her concern grew, the family reached out to friends and acquaintances in hopes of finding Emily. Emily's stepfather was working at the hospital that day. He sensed something was wrong. He knew Emily had intended to pick up some items, and her failure to answer calls made him even more anxious. That evening, the family quickly decided to file a missing person report. At that time, no one knew where Emily was, who the driver was, or where she was headed. The only clue the family had was an online conversation with the woman, who mentioned living in the Jardim Florianopolis neighborhood in Cuiabá. This clue marked the beginning of a search by family members and friends. Worried and desperate, they knocked on doors in the neighborhood, checked the streets, and attempted to call the number mentioned in the messages, but no one answered. Communication had completely stopped. Emily's phone was still on, but she wasn't answering. Then, Natalie suddenly changed her online behavior. She stopped replying to chat group messages and withdrew her support for others. Later, it was revealed that shortly after Emily left home, Natalie deleted all her messages and her account. This disappearance from the online world only confirmed the family's deepest fears. This was not a chance occurrence. By the evening of March 12th, the search for Emily was in full swing. Her family had reached out to the local police, shared her photos on social media, and appealed to the public for assistance. The initial hours after her disappearance were filled with urgency and anxiety, but no one anticipated how drastically the situation would develop. The following morning, March 13, 2024, a woman arrived at the emergency room of Santa Helena Hospital in Cuiabá with a newborn. She was in a wheelchair and told the hospital staff that she had given birth at home the day before. She described the labor as quick and straightforward, so she hadn't felt the need for medical help at that time. Now, she said, she was just there for a post-delivery checkup. The woman introduced herself as Natalie. That morning, the hospital staff member on duty was Emily's stepfather, a radiology technician. Although he did not know Natalie personally, he immediately sensed that something was wrong when he saw her. The previous evening, Emily had gone missing, and one of the primary theories suggested it was linked to a conversation she had with an online stranger who was offering baby items. Emily had previously mentioned to both her mother and her stepfather that she met someone online. She even shared a photo of her from the messaging app. Emily's stepfather immediately recognized the woman in the photo as the same person Emily had been talking to before she disappeared. Natalie was holding a newborn baby that the doctors believed had just been born. However, something seemed unusual. Her behavior and physical state did not align with what one would expect from someone who had recently given birth. There were no visible signs of pain, post-labor symptoms, bleeding, or trauma. Medical staff also found that she was not producing milk when she tried to breastfeed. Even the way she stood and moved raised concerns. Even though she arrived in a wheelchair, she moved around confidently and chose to sit in a chair rather than needing to. A preliminary medical evaluation raised concerns. There were no signs that she had recently given birth. Her cervix was not dilated, and her uterus was of normal size, showing no changes or discharges that usually occur after delivery. This became crucial evidence that proved her story was false. The medical staff quickly informed hospital administrators and contacted local authorities about the situation. Emily's stepfather told investigators that Emily had gone missing the day before after planning to meet a woman. When he recognized the woman in front of him matched Emily's description and photo, his concerns grew. When officers arrived at the hospital, Natalie claimed that the newborn girl was her daughter, whom she had given birth to at home. She could not provide any documentation to support her claim, saying the birth was unexpected and there was no time to go to a medical facility. She answered questions calmly and showed no signs of distress. Investigators started looking into the origin of the newborn. They ordered emergency blood tests and DNA analysis. Medical professionals confirmed that the baby had been born within the last 24 hours, which matched the timeline of Emily's disappearance. This led to a troubling question: could this child be Emily's daughter? Investigators examined Natalie's phone and found deleted conversations, including exchanges with Emily. These messages showed that Emily had agreed to meet Natalie to receive baby items. This evidence indicated a clear pattern of deception. Natalie had created a false identity, gained trust, and arranged a meeting under false pretenses. At this point, the idea that Natalie had simply gone to the hospital for a checkup was no longer believable. Law enforcement began to suspect that Natalie may have brought a baby that she did not give birth to, but rather one that was taken from someone else. Their suspicions were confirmed when they analyzed ultrasound images that Natalie had shared on social media. Investigators discovered that these images did not belong to her. They were taken from another woman's profile, a woman living in a different state, who had no known connection to Natalie. As these discrepancies emerged, the police shifted their focus to finding Emily. The infant Natalie had brought to the hospital was placed in temporary protective custody, under the care of social services, until her biological identity could be verified. Shortly after, Natalie was taken to the police station for formal questioning. At first, she remained silent. When directly asked about the child's origin, she gave vague answers, claiming that everything had been explained and that nothing wrong had occurred. Although she appeared calm and showed no signs of panic, her reluctance to provide a clear explanation led investigators to suspect that she was stalling. Only after investigators showed her the medical exam results, which disproved her claim of giving birth, along with the recovered text messages linking her to Emily, did Natalie change her story. She then shared her initial account of events. She claimed to have met Emily in online parenting groups and said that Emily was struggling in her relationship. Emily had thought about not keeping the baby. Natalie asserted that she offered to take care of the child and that Emily had agreed. However, law enforcement had doubts about this explanation. Emily's family strongly denied any claims that she intended to give up her daughter. They insisted that Emily had been excited about her baby's arrival and never showed any doubts about keeping her. The whole family actively prepared for the new baby by buying clothes, setting up a nursery, and celebrating together. Emily's mother and stepfather emphasized that she viewed her future daughter as the most important part of her life, and the thought of giving the baby away was entirely unthinkable for her. This information was part of the official case file, and Natalie's statements were now being examined for inconsistencies. When faced with increasing evidence, Natalie eventually changed her story. In a second interview with investigators, she confessed that she had tricked Emily into coming to a house by pretending to offer baby items. Emily arrived alone, as they had agreed in their online communication. Emily then began to feel pain and sat down, complaining of cramps. At that moment, Natalie approached her from behind and forcefully restrained her. After Emily lost consciousness, Natalie bound her wrists and ankles with materials she had available. She then tried to deliver the baby by making an incision in Emily's abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool. Emily received no medical assistance and ultimately died due to severe blood loss. Natalie did not express any regret in her statement. She claimed that she wanted to take care of the baby and did not mean to cause any harm. However, the way she acted, using restraints and preparing certain materials, suggested that her actions were thought out beforehand. As Natalie continued to speak, her versions of events became more inconsistent with the facts. Investigators ultimately determined that the incident was pre-planned. After questioning Natalie, law enforcement started investigating all places associated with her. One property in the Jardim Florianopolis area received special attention. This private residence, owned by Natalie's brother, was said to be where she met Emily. During the property inspection, police noticed an area behind the house where the ground looked recently disturbed. The soil was uneven. They quickly cordoned off the area and called in forensic specialists. As the specialists carefully removed the top layer of soil, they discovered that a body had been buried. Emily's body was found in a shallow grave, covered loosely with dirt and debris. The way the body was positioned indicated it had been disposed of hurriedly. Her wrists and ankles showed signs of restraints, including ropes and bits of plastic cable. Investigators later determined that the bindings were made from old internet wiring. The grave itself was poorly dug, without the use of tools, and was barely big enough to hold the body. Emily's body displayed clear signs of trauma on her body. Her face had visible injuries, including bruises, swelling, and scratches. Forensic experts noted damage to her cheekbones and nose. There were also marks on her neck that suggested she had been choked, as well as bruises on her wrists indicating she had been forcefully held down. The autopsy revealed that these injuries occurred while she was alive, implying the use of significant force. It was determined that her death resulted from severe blood loss due to a deep wound in her abdomen. The precise T-shaped incision in her lower abdomen indicated that it was not an accident. Forensic experts indicated that the shape and depth of the cut suggested the perpetrator had a basic understanding of internal anatomy and made an effort to avoid injuring the baby. This degree of knowledge is rare for someone without medical training, although it could be obtained by watching detailed instructional videos. This was further confirmed by analyzing Natalie's internet search history. A key finding was that the burial site had been prepped in advance. Initially, Natalie claimed she dug the grave after the incident, but she later changed her story, admitting it was prepared the day before the meeting. A forensic team carefully examined the scene. Using chemical tests, they discovered important traces of biological material both inside the house and throughout the property. Blood stains were present in multiple rooms. Although some parts of the floor had been cleaned, residues were still left in the tile grout and seams. These findings were meticulously recorded and included in the criminal case. Given the amount of evidence, authorities officially reclassified the case as a premeditated crime with aggravating factors. Immediately after her arrest, Natalie stated that she acted alone and that her husband, relatives, anyone else were unaware of her plans. At that time, the house was occupied by her brother and his wife. Natalie stated that her brother and his wife were not home when the crime happened, but investigators could not confirm this. Their exact whereabouts during that time remained uncertain. A significant question was whether they could genuinely be unaware of a freshly dug pit on the property or that someone had come in to help clean the house. However, it was later established that Natalie had been to the house several times leading up to the incident, under the pretense of helping with chores or spending the weekend. This made her visits seem normal and unremarkable to those living there. Forensic experts noted that it would be very challenging for a single person to dig a pit, commit an act of violence, perform a makeshift procedure, move a body, clean the crime scene, hide evidence, and leave the area without drawing attention, all within a short period. This is especially true given the logistical difficulties involved. The body was wrapped in fabric and required various materials, while the cleaning process included removing items, white blood, and washing clothing. Each of these tasks demanded time, strength, and coordination. Did Natalie truly act alone? At the time of the investigation, there were increasing suspicions, but no solid evidence was found linking anyone else to the case. No family member had been officially identified as an accomplice. Cayo Police Chief Fernando Alvarez Albuquerque said authorities are continuing to investigate whether Natalie's husband, brother, and the driver had anything to do with the death and burial. After the body was officially identified and all forensic procedures were completed, Emily's family received permission for a burial. Because of the condition of the remains, the service was conducted quickly. The ceremony was brief and did not include a traditional farewell. It was held privately, attended only by immediate family members, Emily's mother, stepfather, the young father of the baby, and a few other relatives. The family was devastated by the loss. They were deeply affected emotionally and unable to speak publicly about their grief. Emily's mother, as reported by those close to her, was in a fragile emotional state and had withdrawn from social interactions, avoiding even her neighbors. Emily's partner, who never expected to become a father under such tragic circumstances. According to the family, he has remained dedicated. He frequently visits the baby. Despite his young age, he has shown a desire to be actively involved in raising his daughter. The newborn, who was rescued after the incident, has been placed temporarily in the care of her grandmother, Emily's mother, a decision made by child welfare authorities and the district attorney's office. Emily's stepfather is also considered one of the responsible guardians. During the first few weeks, medical professionals monitored the baby's condition closely. Fortunately, she stayed in stable health. After receiving medical clearance, the baby was taken home to the same place where her mother had lived. The reason for Natalie's actions remained a key topic of conversation. Even though she was already a mother of 3, she pretended to be pregnant for almost 9 months, creating an illusion of expecting another child. She went to great lengths to forge medical records and create a believable story online, portraying herself as an expectant parent on social media. However, her goal was not just to have another baby. She specifically sought out expecting mothers who were likely to have daughters. Her method of selecting targets, arranging the setting, and researching how to remove and take baby indicated that her actions were carefully planned. Natalie is still in custody, waiting for her trial. The charges against her are still active, and investigators believe the evidence supporting these charges is strong. Emily's case has gained significant attention and raised serious concerns, influencing how online interactions are perceived, particularly among vulnerable groups. It was a warm summer morning in Melbourne, Australia, on Sunday, February 13, 2005. While most people were making plans for Valentine's Day, the city's attention was focused on something far more serious: a missing woman. Her face had become familiar across news broadcasts. Her name was Maria Korp, and she had been gone for 4 days. That morning, a park caretaker made his way to work at King's Domain along Dallas Brooks Drive. He normally didn't work on Sundays, but a routine inspection of the water tanks had brought him in. After wrapping up his checks, he stopped by a nearby cafe for coffee. That was when he noticed something odd: a red Mazda parked nearby. The color and make matched the car described in the media all week. Curious and increasingly uneasy, he walked over to the vehicle. The front seats were cluttered, with papers strewn everywhere and a stale bread roll left behind. The doors were locked. Nothing seemed forcibly entered, but the scene felt wrong, too quiet, too abandoned. He made the call to the police. When officers arrived, they verified what the caretaker suspected. The car was registered to Maria Korp, the woman who had vanished without a trace days earlier. Just after 1 p.m., forensic technicians began their search. From the outside, it looked like any other parked car until they opened the trunk. Inside, they found a woman, pale, injured, and completely still. It was Maria. There was no movement or signs of life. And then, suddenly, she breathed. Against all odds, Maria was still alive, but barely. She had endured what no one should: days trapped inside the scorching trunk of a car without food or water, suffering serious head injuries and with no way to call for help. By then, the heat of the Australian summer had turned the vehicle into an oven. Every second she survived in that space defied explanation. Maria was immediately taken to the hospital. Doctors determined she had suffered a traumatic brain injury, dehydration, and a dangerous lack of oxygen to her brain. She was placed in an induced coma and hooked up to life support. Her condition was critical. What led Maria Korp to that? Who wanted her gone? And could she survive long enough to tell the world what really happened? Maria's story began far from the busy streets of Melbourne, in a small, rugged village on the Portuguese island of Madeira. Born on January 14, 1955, she was one of 12 children in a devout Catholic family that lived high in the hills, surrounded by farmland and faith. Life was hard. The home had no plumbing, the toilet was outside, and the nearest hospital was hours away, likely unreachable without a car. Despite these challenges, the family was self-sufficient. They owned land, ran a productive farm, raised their children with discipline and devotion. Maria, like her siblings, worked in the fields and followed the rhythm of village life. She was gentle, quiet, never dreamed of much beyond what she knew: marriage, motherhood, and religion. Her heart had already chosen the boy next door. They were young and in love, planning a life together. Her family approved, his did not. Then tragedy struck. He was sent away for military service and never returned. He died before turning 20. The grief changed Maria. She often said she would never love anyone as deeply again. But her parents had other plans. They arranged a marriage for her with a man. At 19, Maria married a man she barely knew. They soon left Madeira in search of a better life. In 1975, they immigrated to Australia, settling in the suburbs of Melbourne. They both found work in a local factory. Maria adapted quickly. She learned English, adjusted to the culture, and found her footing in this unfamiliar land. Her husband, on the other hand, never settled. He disliked their new life and longed to return home, but Maria refused. Australia was their future. In 1978, they welcomed their daughter, Lorgues. They bought a modest home and lived simply. But in 1987, disaster struck again. Her husband died unexpectedly of a heart attack. He wasn't even 40. Maria, who was only 32, became a widow and a single mother overnight. With no time to mourn, she went back to work to provide for her daughter. She kept going, step by step, day after day. Somehow, she endured. Eventually, Maria found a second chance at love while working in a tire factory. There, she met Joe Corp, an Australian-born man who was 3 years younger and full of charm. He brought laughter back into her life. However, there was a significant issue: Joe was already married with children. Despite this, he was determined to win Maria over. Although she held strong religious beliefs and principles, her loneliness and hope gradually weakened her ability to resist him. Joe promised that he would leave his wife. Eventually, he did. His decision surprised his family. In front of his children, Joe told his wife that he was leaving her for another woman. While she had suspected infidelity, she never anticipated the public humiliation that followed. By 1991, Joe's marriage had officially ended, and within a few months, he married Maria. In 1994, they had a son named Damien. They lived with Maria's daughter, Laura, in a peaceful suburb of Melbourne. To the people around them, they appeared to be a happy couple. Maria's family believed she had found a sense of peace in her new relationship. They often remarked that Maria loved Joe just as much as she had loved her previous husband. They frequently traveled to Portugal, bringing gifts for Maria's relatives, such as household appliances and electronics, anything they needed, thanks to Joe's support. Some of Maria's siblings thought he was showing off, while others appreciated his generosity. In their eyes, Joe had become the favored son-in-law. Beneath the surface of their quiet home life, things were not as they appeared. Joe had a complicated past. Before Maria, he had relationships with other women. While married, he was unfaithful and even boasted to his brother about his affairs. His ex-wife later shared that he was very controlling, discouraging her from working and telling her what to wear, all while pretending to care. Joe always wanted everything to go his way. Joe was born in 1958, was one of 5 siblings in a typical Australian family. He performed well in school, enjoyed sports, but when he enlisted in the military in 1976, he struggled to adapt and left after less than a year. The tough conditions led him to skip duties to watch cricket matches or spend time with his girlfriend. In 1977, he married, and he had 2 children. Joe worked at a tire factory and eventually became a manager. On the surface, he seemed like a dedicated family man, but he had his secrets. When Maria entered his life, it wasn't just another fling. He decided to be with her for good. Together, they built a new life. Maria continued to work, take care of her children, support her family, and serve her church, while Joe became her partner and a source of strength. However, their relationship had hidden problems. At first, the issues were minor and easy to overlook, but over time, they expanded into something much more serious, leading to a shocking incident. After years of saving, they started building their dream home, a spacious 5-bedroom house featuring a home cinema, a beautiful garden, a large walk-in wardrobe, and a garage for 3 cars. It was more than Maria had ever hoped for, all made possible through years of discipline and careful budgeting. When the house was finally completed, Maria felt a deep sense of pride. To the outside world, her life seemed perfect: a loving husband, 2 children, and a big home. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the once passionate relationship between Joe and Maria had started to fade. Joe developed new interests that Maria struggled to comprehend, particularly in their intimate life. As a result, she became more emotionally distant. Seeking solace, she found refuge in church and eventually stopped sharing a bed with him altogether. They began sleeping in separate rooms, growing further apart. While Maria sought comfort in her faith, Joe escaped into a fantasy world. He constructed a secret online identity as a construction business owner who was separated from his wife and looking for someone to pamper. His profile presented an enticing image, attracting responses from various women. Initially, their conversations were innocent, but things quickly changed. Joe began meeting women in person and having short-term relationships while lying about many parts of his life. As he spent more time online, he spent less time at home, which Maria noticed. In September 2003, she shared her concerns with her daughter, Laura, who was now an adult, expressing her suspicion that Joe was being unfaithful. Maria started to observe him more closely, and her fears were confirmed when she found intimate messages and receipts from motels. The argument that ensued was intense. Joe denied any wrongdoing and turned the blame onto Maria. He claimed she was emotionally unavailable, always praying, and frequently on the phone with her sisters. This infuriated Maria. She briefly thought about divorce but hesitated due to her religious beliefs. Instead, she decided to fight for their marriage. Determined to win Joe back, Maria made significant changes in her life. She started a diet, refreshed her wardrobe, and even agreed to join him at swinger clubs, actions that were completely out of character for her. She hoped this would rekindle their bond. However, nothing improved. Joe continued his affairs, often stayed out late, and the lies persisted. By early 2005, Maria had reached her breaking point. She threatened to leave, changed the locks, and kicked Joe out. This time, Joe took her seriously. He promised to change, said he would end his affairs, and wanted to start anew. For a brief moment, it seemed like they could reconcile. Maria even told her friends that things were looking up. But then came Wednesday, February 9, 2005. The day started like any other. Maria and Joe woke up early to get ready for work, both of them working at different factories. Around 6:30 a.m., Maria left the house, followed shortly by Joe. Their daughter Laura was still living with them but had a later start time for her job and was still asleep when they left. Everything appeared normal until midday. The school called to inform that their son, Damien, had not been picked up. It was Maria's responsibility to pick him up every day, but no one could reach her. Confused, Joe went to collect Damien himself. He wondered if he had misunderstood or if Maria had asked him for help and he'd forgotten. However, when he returned home, Maria was still missing. As night fell, she had yet to return. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and none of her friends had seen or heard from her. The situation became even more alarming when they discovered that Maria had not shown up for work and had not called in sick. There were no messages or explanations. Maria was not the kind of person to just disappear. That evening, Joe reported Maria missing. The authorities responded immediately. By the next morning, her disappearance was all over the news. Her photo and a description of her missing red Mazda were broadcast on TV and printed in newspapers. The community anxiously hoped for updates. However, what no one realized was that a dark and troubling truth was already visible. Time was quickly running out. The breakthrough in the case occurred just 4 days after Maria disappeared. A city worker found her Mazda parked near King's Domain in Melbourne. It appeared to be an ordinary car until investigators checked the boot. Inside, they discovered Maria crumpled and motionless. She was alive but in critical condition. Doctors identified a severe head injury, but the real concern was the trauma to her neck, indicating someone had attempted to strangle her, cutting off her oxygen for long enough to cause permanent harm. Believing she was dead, the attacker had stuffed her into the boot of her own car. She endured 4 days in that sealed space without water, food, or airflow during the peak of the Australian summer. She was quickly taken to the hospital, put into an induced coma, and connected to machines. Doctors estimated she had only a 25% chance of survival due to severe oxygen deprivation, which had caused significant brain damage that might be irreversible. While the medical team worked hard to save her life, detectives were looking into a different issue: who had tried to kill Maria. They didn't need to look far for a suspect. Before she went missing, Maria had prepared for a potential crisis. She had given a close friend a bag containing printed emails, hotel receipts, and proof of her husband's cheating. "If anything happens to her," she said, "please give this to the police." The warnings didn't come without reason. Maria had been regularly visiting a psychic, and one of them warned her that she was in danger. The warning was clear: her husband might be involved. Maria took this seriously, and she wasn't alone in her concerns. Joe's brother, Gust, also had doubts early on in the search. Gust feared something terrible might have already happened to his sister-in-law. Additionally, Maria's daughter, Laura, recalled something unsettling. On the night Maria was attacked, February 9th, Laura suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and thought she heard her mother scream. When she went downstairs, she found Joe there, calm and smiling. He told her that Maria had just had a bad dream. Uncertain, Laura returned to bed. It was only later that she would start to question whether that scream was the moment her mother's life was in jeopardy. Joe had a solid alibi: he was at work all day, as confirmed by his co-workers. He picked up his son from school and showed real concern when Maria didn't return home. His timeline seemed perfect, but the police had doubts. While they believed Joe may not have directly harmed Maria, they thought he could have been involved in planning it. Soon, investigators uncovered another person of interest, a woman named Tanya Herman. Tanya Herman's story began in 1966. She was born into a traditional working-class Catholic family as one of 4 children. Her childhood was normal: she enjoyed sports, was friendly, often dreamed of love and weddings. At 21, she married in 1987, but her husband was abusive, leading to a difficult divorce. Her next relationship ended in betrayal, but it also brought her a daughter, whom she raised by herself. To support her family, Tanya held various office jobs, worked early shifts, and eventually moved to Melbourne for a fresh start. During this time, she worked as a waitress at a club, where she met Mr. Herman, a sailor. They got married and had a daughter, but unfortunately, that marriage also did not last. By 2002, Tanya was single, struggling to raise her 2 children. To earn some money, she began babysitting kids in her neighborhood. However, her babysitting job ended in scandal when several parents accused her of locking children in a room, and one child even broke their leg. These allegations forced her out of work. Her relationship with her teenage daughter worsened. At just 13 years old, her daughter chose to live with her father. As a result, Tanya became isolated and both financially and emotionally exhausted. She began spending time in online chat rooms. In late 2003, she met a man named Joe, who claimed to be a separated business owner looking for a fresh start and said he had 2 kids. However, the truth was that Joe still married and living with his wife, Maria. Their first meeting in person was in February 2004, and the connection between them was immediate. Tanya was enchanted. Joe seemed to say all the right things and consistently made time for her. He told her he was in the final stages of his divorce. She believed him. By late 2004, they had even rented a house together, just minutes from the home he shared with Maria and his children, of which Tanya was completely unaware. Joe went further by decorating their love nest with furniture similar to that of his marital home. He also enrolled Tanya's daughter in the same school as his own son, a disturbing detail that would only be revealed much later. Joe never moved in with Tanya full-time, despite various excuses. He claimed he was busy with paperwork, finalizing the custody agreement, or waiting for the right moment. However, Tanya began to notice inconsistencies in his stories, and his visits became less frequent. His fabrications, which he had mastered, started to fall apart. When Joe finally admitted that he was still married and that his life was far from what he had described, Tanya was furious. However, her anger quickly faded as her deep love for him took over. She decided to forgive him, but that forgiveness gradually transformed into obsession. Tanya started to follow Maria, observing her at the school gates and memorizing her daily routines. By the end of 2004, Joe was secretly planning to start a new life with his mistress while still living with his wife. His family knew about Tanya, and surprisingly, some even approved of the relationship. They had never liked Maria, likely because their relationship began with cheating. To them, Tanya represented a fresh start. In December of that year, Joe confided in a friend that he was in a new relationship and that his marriage was over. However, Maria remained unaware of this. She still thought they were trying to resolve their issues. What Joe didn't mention was that divorcing Maria meant he would have to divide their assets, including their home and the life they had worked so hard to build together. When police questioned Joe about Maria's disappearance, he confessed to having an affair, but his alibi was strong. In contrast, Tanya did not have an alibi. Detectives began focusing on her when they noticed that she had taken her daughter to school unusually late on the morning Maria disappeared. They brought Tanya in for questioning and searched her home. In the back of her wardrobe, they discovered a pair of sports shoes with red stains that were later confirmed to be blood matching Maria Corp's DNA. Further DNA evidence was found in the Corp family's garage, indicating that the attack likely occurred there. The investigators suspect that, as Maria approached her car, Tanya ambushed her, possibly with Joe's assistance. Once Maria was knocked unconscious, they put her in the trunk of her own car. Tanya then drove away, while Joe went to work, acting as if nothing unusual had occurred. Meanwhile, Tanya's explanation did not add up. She stated that her daughter had simply overslept, which caused her to be late. However, during questioning, detectives observed her nervousness and her frequent mention of Joe. Her tone was affectionate, almost infatuated, revealing that she was willing to do anything for him. Police suspected that both Joe and Tanya were involved in the crime, as they had motives, opportunities. The evidence against them. However, Joe denied any wrongdoing, claiming he was attempting to end the affair. Lacking direct evidence of his guilt, detectives decided to try a different approach. They contacted Tanya's brother and asked him to wear a recording device. This strategy proved successful. During a recorded conversation, Tanya confessed that Joe had no plans to leave his wife because he didn't want to risk losing his wealth. She revealed that Joe believed Maria was the only obstacle to their happiness. Joe thought he couldn't be the one to make Maria disappear without arousing suspicion. However, Tanya was willing to do it, convinced that no one would look for Maria and that their love justified the actions they were considering. Tanya and Joe were arrested on February 16, 2005. Tanya confessed right away, but Joe did not. He accused Tanya of being jealous and insisted that she acted alone. Tanya pleaded guilty to causing serious injury and, without going to trial, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 9 years. Meanwhile, Maria remained in a coma and did not regain consciousness for several months. Joe was released on bail, and on June 9, he submitted a formal request to visit his wife in the hospital. His request was approved, but unfortunately, her health was not getting better. On July 26, the doctors concluded that keeping her on life support was no longer viable and advised discontinuing it. This decision sparked significant controversy, led to protests outside the hospital. Maria's family was heartbroken, publicly disagreed with the doctor's recommendation, but the medical advice remained unchanged. On August 5, 2005, nearly 6 months after the attack, Maria Corp passed away. Her funeral took place on August 12. On that same day, Joe made 2 phone calls, one to his ex-wife and another to a journalist, where he expressed his intention to take his own life. When emergency services arrived at his home, they found Joe in the garage, standing on a stool with a noose around his neck. Upon seeing the responders, he jumped. Unfortunately, he died at the scene. Beside him were photos of Maria, sports memorabilia, and a handwritten note in which he asserted his innocence. We will never fully know if that note was the final lie or the truth. If Joe had gone to trial, it might have been difficult to prove his guilt, but justice never had the opportunity to take its course. In 2013, several years later, Tanya, who was still in prison, asked to marry another female inmate, but her request was denied. On February 14, 2014, she was paroled after serving a little over 8 years in Dame Phyllis Frost Maximum Security Prison, and her new partner was there to greet her at the prison gates. The death of Maria Corp shocked the entire nation of Australia. Maria was a woman who dedicated her life to her family, love, and faith, yet she was betrayed by the person she trusted the most. Her death was not merely a crime, it was a tragic outcome of obsession, selfishness, and deceit. One of her attackers went to prison, while the other avoided justice by committing to end his life. However, the person who truly paid the highest price was Maria. Her voice was silenced, her future taken away, and her story remains a painful reminder of one of Australia's darkest true crime cases. A question that remains forever unanswered: is Joe Corp guilty? Valentine's Day is typically about celebrating love, but for Susan Hamilton, it took a dark turn. As she prepared to leave her house, her hair still wet and fully dressed, everything seemed normal. However, soon after, her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, frantically called 911. When the police arrived, they discovered a shocking scene. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in John's account began to surface. Was this attack random, or was it connected to their home life? In Oklahoma City, a love story unfolded that would eventually surprise the entire community. It all began in 1985 when Susan, a devoted single mother and Christian nurse, met Dr. John Hamilton, a well-respected obstetrician and gynecologist. John, a devoted father, instantly felt a strong connection to Susan's kindness. Susan, in turn, appreciated John's supportive nature. 2 years later, they married in 1987, creating what many viewed as an ideal life together. They settled into a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, a testament to the success of John's thriving medical practice. Susan chose to leave her nursing job to focus on their marriage and community involvement, quickly becoming a respected figure in both their church and local community. John and Susan Hamilton appeared to live a perfect life. Their relationship seemed filled with joy. They often enjoyed luxurious vacations and romantic outings together. John was particularly generous, showering Susan with expensive gifts like jewelry, luxury cars, including a Porsche, and designer items that highlighted both their wealth. He was attentive and caring, always striving to make Susan feel cherished. Susan, in turn, loved him just as much. Their marriage lasted over 15 years, during which they experienced both shared achievements and private struggles. Despite not having children together, John had a family from an earlier relationship. They remained committed to one another. However, beneath this seemingly perfect life, issues began to arise. What looked like a fairy tale was soon to take a dark and tragic turn. As time went on, John became a key figure in the termination of pregnancy. In addition to delivering babies and addressing women's health issues, he also performed termination of pregnancy at his clinic. This aspect of his work not only faced moral opposition but also posed personal risks. Activists often gathered outside his clinic, holding signs, handing out provocative flyers, spreading his name and photo in attempts to shame or intimidate him. The harassment extended beyond the clinic. It reached his home as well. His wife, Susan, started receiving threatening phone calls. Some of these messages were so alarming that she feared for her safety. Despite living under this shadow of fear, the Hamiltons focused on maintaining their public image. They hosted fancy gatherings, stayed involved in community activities, and appeared to live an enviable life. John consistently showed love and affection for Susan, making every Valentine's Day a special occasion. They followed their cherished tradition of exchanging heartfelt cards and small gifts, keeping the romance alive throughout the years. On the morning of February 14, 2001, John started his day by leaving for work around 7 a.m. to perform surgery at the hospital. He arrived in regular clothes and changed into scrubs. After completing the first procedure at 8:40 a.m., he returned home briefly. John stated that he left a bouquet of flowers and a Valentine's card for Susan before heading back for his second surgery. He mentioned that she was not home at that time. When he returned later that morning, everything had changed. John sensed that something was wrong. The door was slightly open, which was unusual. Inside, the house felt eerily quiet. As he moved through the rooms, he was unprepared for what he found next. In the bathroom, Susan lay on the floor, covered in blood. Her injuries were shocking. She had been strangled with 2 neckties, and her skull had been so severely crushed that brain matter was visible. The murder weapon was never found. In a state of desperation, John called 911, his voice shaking as he pleaded for assistance. He was explaining that he had attempted CPR but was unable to revive her. Emergency responders arrived within minutes to a horrifying scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, indicating a violent struggle. This wasn't just a murder, it seemed excessively brutal. The level of violence suggested that whoever did this must have had deep personal animosity towards Susan. But who could act like that about a woman so loved by everyone? Officers quickly noticed some troubling details at the scene. Both of Hamilton's cars were parked in the driveway. Inside the house, John's shirt and shoes were covered in blood. There were also blood traces in his car. Investigators found the inconsistencies and the signs of extreme violence hard to overlook. Initially, the situation didn't add up. John and Susan appeared to be the perfect couple, loving, successful. Their life resembled a picture from a magazine. However, the reality was much more sinister than anyone had anticipated. By that day, it would no longer represent love. Instead, it would mark the start of a startling investigation that shattered the community's perception of John and Susan Hamilton. Suspicion quickly turned to her husband, Dr. John Hamilton, as he was the last person known to have seen her alive and was the one who found her body. That evening, the police arrested him. From the start, John's behavior was questionable. During the interrogation, he seemed very upset, his hands trembled, he couldn't remain still, and at times he appeared inconsolable. Some believed he was simply overcome with grief, while others thought his reactions seemed staged. His inconsistent behavior made it hard to distinguish between true sorrow and possible guilt. Even though the front door was left open, unusual for their wealthy neighborhood, nothing valuable had been stolen. The house, filled with luxury items like expensive jewelry, electronics, and fine art, remained untouched. Investigators quickly dismissed the idea of robbery. There were no indications of forced entry. However, a small marble figurine was missing from the bathroom. Detectives believed it could have been used to harm Susan, but the figurine was never located. Investigators explored various options due to the lack of a clear motive or external suspects. One theory was that the murder might have been politically motivated. Due to his job, John faced threats and protests. The couple became openly targeted. However, there was no concrete evidence connecting the crime to any of the protesters. No eyewitnesses, no signs of forced entry, and no leads to follow. The key discovery was surprisingly personal, a Valentine's Day card. While searching the Hamilton home, police found a card that Susan had written for John. What seemed like a straightforward love note became significant for investigators. The message said, "I obviously bought this before last Monday, so I guess it doesn't seem appropriate now. I still love you, though. Have a good day, Susan." This raised concerns for detectives. What events occurred the previous Monday? Why did she feel the card was no longer suitable? Questions began to arise. The card's tone, which felt conflicted and detached, sharply contrasted with the loving image they showed to others. Soon, rumors of a hidden truth started to emerge. One of Susan's closest friends informed the police that she suspected John was having an affair. This revelation shattered the image of the devoted husband and revealed something much darker. Susan had confided to her daughter that she felt trapped in her marriage. She described her relationship as one-sided, where everything centered around John. He demanded her attention, ignored her feelings, and made her feel invisible. She even admitted to considering leaving him. The seemingly perfect marriage that the public admired was turning out to be a fragile facade. Detectives investigated further, revealing a more concerning situation. Susan found phone records indicating over 60 calls to the same woman, a stripper from a local club. She printed the records and confronted John, who denied any wrongdoing, claiming the woman was simply a hospital patient. However, Susan was skeptical. She confided in a friend about the confrontation and mentioned she was considering divorce, which may have been the breaking point. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that Susan was getting ready to leave a marriage that no longer fulfilled her. John faced the possibility of losing not only his wife but also his reputation, lifestyle, and perhaps his career. By February 14th, the Valentine's Day traditions that once represented lasting love now hid the painful reality of a crumbling relationship. What used to feel like genuine affection, flowers, a card, might have actually been a frantic attempt to salvage something that had already fallen apart behind their lavish facade. The extravagant gifts and polished public image masked a brewing storm. When it finally erupted, it resulted in a chaotic and deeply personal situation that could no longer be overlooked. As the investigation into Susan Hamilton's brutal murder progressed, a more troubling picture of John Hamilton emerged. Behind his polished image and respected career was a man who desperately wanted to protect his reputation. A pending divorce and a public affair threatened to ruin everything he had built. Initially, John denied any romantic relationship with the woman Susan suspected, insisting she was just a patient. However, the truth eventually surfaced. Investigators found that he had been frequently visiting her at the strip club where she worked, and she had given him private dances. Despite the growing evidence, John maintained that nothing physical had happened between them, but this defense seemed weak. One important detail emerged: John had written a letter to the woman, saying he could no longer be her doctor. While it might seem like he was ending their relationship, it raised questions. Was he trying to regain Susan's trust, or was he manipulating the situation to postpone a divorce? To the police, it appeared to be an attempt at damage control. The media found the story intriguing and became heavily involved, sensing there was more beneath the surface. One local news station even sent the 911 call John made to a voice stress analyst. The results were surprising. The analysis showed his voice had very little stress, uncharacteristic for someone who had just found his wife's mutilated body. This indicated that he wasn't panicked or heartbroken, but rather calm and in control, as if he had rehearsed what to say. The inconsistencies continued to unfold. John told emergency responders that he tried to perform CPR, but investigators were doubtful. They noticed there was no blood on his mouth or face. Given the severity of Susan's head injuries, if he had genuinely attempted to resuscitate her, he would likely have been covered in blood. Instead, evidence indicated otherwise. Forensic analysis showed that the blood found on John's shirt and shoes belonged to Susan. Even more incriminating was the discovery of her blood and tissue inside his car, which was much more than initially thought. John claimed he moved his car to give paramedics space, but this explanation fell apart when examined closely. The presence of tissue fragments suggested that Susan had been in the car after she was injured or that John had moved evidence after the murder. The blood pattern found on John's clothing did not support his account of the events. Instead of suggesting he was an innocent bystander trying to help, the evidence indicated he was directly involved in the violence. The investigators' theory was disturbing. In a fit of rage or desperation, John tried to strangle Susan with his ties. When she fought back, he became more violent. He hit her in the head with a blunt object, possibly the missing marble figurine. After she fell, he violently crushed her skull. This was not a random act or a robbery, it was a personal and brutal murder driven by overwhelming anger. Evidence against John was piling up: the affair, blood evidence, stress analysis, the missing figurine, and a motive rooted in ego, pride, and a fear of shame. Their marriage had been troubled long before that tragic day. On the morning of the murder, John returned home after his first surgery, not just to drop off flowers and a Valentine's card as he had claimed, but to confront Susan. The argument that ensued would end their marriage in a horrific way. The timeline shows that Susan was getting ready to leave for a 9:30 a.m. appointment with a friend. She was found not to be wearing clothes, with damp hair. Detectives found an important detail in John's hospital schedule. His second surgery was supposed to start at 9 a.m., but he didn't arrive until 9:38. The staff had even sent someone to search for him because of his delay. During those 30 unexplained minutes, John had the opportunity to commit the murder. He thought he would have more time to clean up, but a sudden call back to the hospital interrupted him. In a panic, he changed out of his blood-stained clothes and returned to work just in time for surgery, appearing calm, focused, and professional as if nothing had happened. Hours later, when he called 911, he acted devastated. However, for investigators, the truth was already starting to come out. The close distance of their home to the hospital was crucial to the case, showing that John could have committed the crime and still returned in time for surgery. More importantly, it ruled out the possibility that someone else had entered the house in the brief window between John's departure and Susan's planned outing. There simply wasn't enough time for another person to commit the crime without being noticed. During the trial preparations, John's defense team decided to hire a blood spatter expert to evaluate the evidence. However, this decision proved to be detrimental for John's case. While testifying, the expert was asked if the prosecution had missed anything important, and he revealed a shocking finding. He had identified blood stains on the inside sleeve of John's shirt that matched patterns consistent with blunt force trauma. Although he was brought in to support the defense, the expert could not ignore the facts. His analysis confirmed the prosecution's suspicions. The blood must have been there at the exact moment Susan was attacked. This revelation dealt a devastating blow to John Hamilton's defense. In the courtroom, the evidence revealed a disturbing story of deliberate anger. The reasons behind John's actions were evident. The jury acted quickly. John Hamilton was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. He was also required to pay over $11,000 for his incarceration expenses. John is currently incarcerated at the Dick Connor Correctional Center in Hominy, Oklahoma. This case was unprecedented in the county and had a significant impact. John has submitted several appeals, all of which have been rejected. He has consistently claimed that he did not commit the murder. Even now, he insists on his innocence, and a dedicated group of supporters believes he was wrongly convicted. However, the question persists: was justice achieved, or is there more to this story than people understand? Did John Hamilton deserve a life sentence, or was this situation based on circumstantial evidence that was misinterpreted? The Jansen family appeared to be a loving and supportive unit, like many other families. However, one day, everything changed dramatically. An unexpected event occurred in their home. This incident triggered a chain of events that devastated the family and shocked those around them. Law enforcement, friends, neighbors all sought to understand how this seemingly perfect family could unravel what actually happened behind closed doors. In the dense forests of British Columbia, Randy Jansen led an ordinary life in a small town called Langley. Known for its brick storefronts and cozy coffee shops, Langley was viewed as a peaceful haven. Randy experienced years of hard work and unfulfilled dreams that often brought him unhappiness. From a young age, Randy had a strong bond with his father, who worked at a local lumber mill. His father taught him the skills of woodworking. After graduating high school, Randy followed in his father's footsteps by securing a job at the same mill. The job was tough, requiring long hours and significant physical effort, but Randy was used to hard work. In Langley, the lumber mill was seen as a vital part of the local economy and way of life. For more than 10 years, he committed himself to the challenging routine of processing wood and transporting logs. Although the work was repetitive and tiring, it provided him with stability. Each day might have seemed the same, but Randy found meaning in the rhythm of his work and his role in the community. The lumber mill represented stability in Randy's life, while music served as his escape, a way for him to express emotions he often found difficult to put into words. Since childhood, music had been important to him. Over time, playing guitar and singing shifted from being just a hobby to a crucial outlet for his feelings. Randy often performed at a local bar in Langley, where residents gathered to relax after their long workdays and enjoy live music. On stage, he transformed from his usually quiet self into an engaging and energetic performer, captivating his audience. The townspeople appreciated his heartfelt performances, which were filled with authenticity and passion. At a local bar one ordinary evening, Randy met Laurel, a woman who would profoundly impact his life. Laurel, 6 years older than Randy, worked as a bartender and often watched his performances from behind the bar. She was confident, charismatic, well loved by the patrons for her ability to create a welcoming atmosphere and her friendly demeanor. What began as casual chats about music and life quickly developed into a deeper bond. Their mutual love for music and shared aspirations brought them closer. Laurel played the piano and, although her life had taken a different path, she had always dreamed of pursuing a professional music career. This common dream, paired with genuine interest in each other, soon evolved into something much more significant. Life at the lumber mill went on as usual for Randy, but everything changed with Laurel's presence. Their relationship grew stronger as they started planning their future together. Although Langley felt familiar and comfortable, it began to seem too small for the aspirations they had. They dreamed of a life where music could be more than just a pastime. They wanted it to be the core of their future. Randy's days at the mill, his nights performing at the bar, and his evenings with Laurel filled him with a sense of purpose, love. He hoped for what lay ahead. Randy and Laurel frequently looked back on their wedding day in 1990. It was a modest ceremony with just their closest friends and family, creating a warm and intimate setting. The event featured live music, including a special song that Randy sang for Laurel, marking the start of their loving journey together. A few years later, their daughter Emily was born. She quickly became the center of their family. Randy often expressed how Emily was the best thing that ever happened to him. Anyone who knew them could see the deep love he had for her. Emily was only 8 years old when her life changed drastically. She started suffering from severe headaches that were so painful she could no longer participate in her music activities. From a young age, Emily had a natural talent for singing, which amazed her parents and earned her awards in competitions. She was living a lively life, taking vocal lessons and dreaming of becoming a singer. Her parents, encouraged by her success, did everything possible to support her dreams. Initially, Randy and Laurel struggled to understand their daughter's condition. They visited multiple doctors and underwent numerous medical tests, but none provided clear answers, leaving them confused. Emily had to leave school and start home-based learning because the bright lights and loud noises in classrooms worsened her severe headaches. Her room turned into a dim sanctuary where she spent most of her time. Randy and Laurel took turns caring for her, trying their best to alleviate her pain and offer comfort during her difficult times. After thorough medical evaluations, the doctors diagnosed Emily with migraines. This news deeply affected her entire family. The medications they prescribed provided only slight relief, easing her pain a little but never completely stopping the headaches. The music she previously cherished, which brought her so much happiness, was now unattainable. Once a vibrant and energetic young woman, Emily began to withdraw, spending most of her time in silence, darkness. Randy and Laurel were determined to find a solution for their daughter's condition. They explored numerous treatments, consulted many specialists, and looked into alternative therapies, but nothing provided the lasting relief they had been hoping for. The medical outlook was bleak. Migraines are often chronic, and many people suffer from them for life. Statistics revealed that around 53% of migraine sufferers cannot drive because of their symptoms, 30% find it difficult to finish their education, and 34% encounter issues in maintaining employment. Although these figures indicated that Emily's situation was relatively common, they offered little comfort to her parents, as they witnessed her once vibrant spirit fade. Randy went through a really tough time during these years. Music, which had once been his escape, now reminded him painfully that Emily could no longer share in the joy it brought her. Playing guitar in the evenings felt empty without her voice alongside him, and performing at the local bar, which used to be a source of joy for him, no longer felt fulfilling. He began to spend more time at home to support Emily as much as he could. However, as her condition worsened, both Randy and Laurel felt increasingly powerless. Their vibrant daughter, who was once full of life and determination, now isolated herself in her room, avoiding the world and its noise. Randy continued to work, but his thoughts were constantly with Emily. Each morning, he hoped to find a way to relieve her suffering. By the time Emily turned 18, her condition had worsened significantly. Her migraine episodes became more frequent and intense, sometimes lasting for several days. This constant pain made it difficult for her to study and maintain friendships. Despite these obstacles, Emily remained determined. She enrolled in the Fine Arts program at the University of British Columbia, aspiring to become an opera singer. For Emily, going to university was not just about academics. It was an opportunity to regain a sense of normalcy and pursue the life she had always dreamed of. Despite feeling physically exhausted and experiencing frequent pain, Emily committed herself to staying active. She took vocal lessons, learned music theory, studied art history and literature. She also participated in student events and concerts whenever possible. Her classmates admired her determination to engage in university life despite the challenges she faced. However, beneath this outward involvement, Emily was battling significant struggles. She frequently had to miss classes and catch up on her studies alone. The strong medications prescribed for her migraines left her feeling tired, drowsy, and weak. Her treatment plan included triptans, anticonvulsants, and antidepressants to help manage her symptoms. But these medications also had serious side effects, such as depression, difficulty concentrating, and a decline in her overall health. Over time, Emily chose to limit her medication intake as much as possible to lessen its effects on her body and began exploring alternative ways to manage her condition. Emily focused on meditation and breathing exercises, used cold compresses on her head, and stayed away from bright lights, strong smells, and loud noises. Her room became a safe space where she could escape anything that increased her pain. During her worst migraine episodes, she would sometimes stay in complete darkness for entire days, while her parents took turns caring for her and doing their best to alleviate her discomfort. Despite these challenges, Emily worked hard to maintain a sense of normal life. She kept in touch with her friends, even though she couldn't see them as frequently as before. Sometimes, she had to cancel plans at the last moment due to sudden migraine attacks. However, her friends remained supportive, visiting her at home and spending time with her to ensure she didn't feel alone. Despite her challenges, Emily remained committed to the things she loved. Her desire to return to music and live a fulfilling life never faltered, even as the journey became increasingly difficult. On May 7, 2015, Randy shocked everyone in his life with a Facebook post. He revealed some unimaginable actions he had taken in the prior 10 days. He started the post by expressing his love for his daughter, Emily, whom he described as an exceptional daughter, talented, intelligent, and kind. Emily brought immense joy to their family, filling their home with laughter and always willing to assist others, even while facing her own struggles. Unfortunately, her illness had robbed her of so much, forcing her to give up dreams she had worked tirelessly to achieve. Emily had been experiencing migraines since elementary school. The persistent pain caused her to fall into deep depression, making it common for her to endure days without relief. Randy observed how his daughter watched her classmates enjoy normal lives while she spent her time in hospitals or isolated in her dark, quiet room. Despite her efforts to hope for a brighter future, nothing seemed to alleviate her suffering. Randy worked at a lumber mill, but when he wasn't working, he dedicated all his time to Emily. He often told his friends that she was his whole world and that he couldn't bear the thought of life without her. Watching her in pain and feeling powerless to help was pushing him toward despair. Friends noted how Randy shared his struggles with them, making it evident how deeply he was affected emotionally. In this Facebook post, he confessed to taking a gun and ending Emily's life, explaining that he did it to free her from her constant pain. He described his vision of her as an angel soaring above the clouds, her long hair flowing in the wind, finally at peace. But he didn't stop there. Randy also revealed that he had taken the life of his wife, Laurel, because he couldn't bear the thought of her enduring the heartbreak of losing their daughter. A few days later, he also ended the life of his sister, Shelley, claiming he wanted to spare her from the shame of his actions. In the post, Randy shared Emily's journey in her battle against illness, highlighting her incredible strength and resilience. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, the illness had taken its toll. Randy expressed his helplessness as he watched her suffer daily, knowing he couldn't change her situation. He often told friends that he would do anything to support Emily, and ultimately, he felt this was the only way to help her. At the end of his Facebook post, Randy mentioned that his family was now in a better place, free from suffering. He expressed sorrow for his actions, took full responsibility, and apologized to anyone he had hurt. The post closed with the haunting phrase, "Rest in peace, my little family." After Randy's post went live, his friends and acquaintances immediately alerted the police out of concern for Randy's family. They were shocked by the content and wanted to ensure everyone's safety. Law enforcement acted quickly after receiving several calls. Officers were sent to Randy's home to look into the matter. One of Randy's closest friends, Brian Jones, was filled with fear and confusion as he read the Facebook post. Initially, he hoped it was just a mistake or a cruel joke. However, when he saw the signature, Daddy-O, Hugs and Kisses, a nickname Randy had used since school, Brian understood that Randy had truly written those words. This left Brian in shock and disbelief. He had always seen Randy as a kind and caring person, deeply devoted to his family. The thought that his friend could commit such an act or even possess a firearm was unfathomable to him. Brian remembered how lovingly Randy spoke of his family, making it difficult for him to grasp how things had taken such a tragic turn. The seriousness of the situation struck him immediately, and he knew he needed to respond quickly. He left work early and made his way to Shelley's house, trying to call Randy as he went. Each unanswered call only increased his worry. When Brian got to Shelley's house, he saw a pile of undelivered newspapers on the porch. This was unusual because Shelley was always dependable and took her responsibilities seriously. Her old van was in the driveway, the curtains were tightly shut. The yard was eerily silent, with no signs of life. Brian knocked on the door multiple times, but no one answered. The atmosphere felt unsettling and unnaturally quiet. Shelley had become a private person after her parents died. She lived by herself, had no children, and hardly spoke to her neighbors. Her primary job was delivering newspapers, and she was recognized for her reliability, punctuality. When Brian noticed the newspapers piled up without being picked up, he became worried and called the police. The dispatcher told him that he wasn't the only one worried about the family. A patrol unit was already on its way to investigate. When the police arrived, they tried to reach Randy Jansen, who was inside his house. They saw him through a second-floor window with a gun. The officers used loudspeakers and attempted to call him, but Randy did not reply. Understanding the seriousness of the situation, the officers proceeded cautiously to prevent further escalation. The house was surrounded, and negotiators began their work, but Randy did not show any intention to surrender or communicate. After several hours, the situation became much more critical. Randy set the house on fire, and officers saw smoke rising from the upper floor. They tried to get inside, but the flames spread too quickly, blocking access through the windows. Officers noticed a body wrapped in a sheet on the first floor, but they couldn't reach it to confirm its identity. Within minutes, the fire took over the entire house. When firefighters arrived, the house was fully engulfed in flames, and they could not save it. Investigators discovered 3 bodies in the charred remains of the house on Llanberis Road in Rosedale. 19-year-old Emily was found in her bedroom, wrapped in a sheet. 50-year-old Laurel was located in the kitchen, covered with a blanket. Both women had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Randy's body was located in a second-floor bedroom. He had died by suicide using a firearm and setting the house ablaze. The positioning of his body and the presence of the weapon indicated that Randy was experiencing severe emotional distress when he made the choice to end his life. When police arrived at the home of Randy's sister in Langley, British Columbia, they found her body in the living room. She had been shot twice in the head and was covered with a blanket. No signs of a struggle, indicating that Randy had likely caught her by surprise. Over the past year, Emily's health had worsened significantly. Doctors had to give her morphine injections to manage her severe pain, and these were used as a last resort. Neighbors often witnessed her parents assisting her into their home after her hospital visits. Emily was so weak that she required help to walk, which was heartbreaking for everyone who knew the family. Randy Jansen, Emily's father, dedicated himself to caring for his family despite facing numerous challenges. A year prior to the tragic events, he sought assistance from their family doctor due to ongoing insomnia and intense stress. He shared his struggles with witnessing his daughter's pain. The doctor suggested using sedatives and advised Randy to focus on getting more rest, but Randy refused the medication, feeling it wouldn't truly solve his problems. Brian noted that Randy had never indicated any thoughts of self-harm or intentions to harm others. He described Randy as a calm and hard-working individual always willing to help. Randy consistently put his family first, so no one could have anticipated he was capable of such actions. Brian observed that Randy had reached his breaking point. He could no longer endure watching his daughter suffer, which led him to make a heartbreaking decision. Neighbors who had known Randy since he was a child found it hard to reconcile this event with the kind and gentle person they remembered. They noted that he had never shown any signs of aggression or cruelty. His actions appeared to stem from a sense of desperation and an inability to cope with the immense pain affecting his family. One neighbor recalled Randy saying that if his daughter were to die, he wouldn't have a reason to live. Emily's last tweet, posted just 4 days before the tragedy, stated, "I complain about the pain, but at least I'm here to feel it. I thank God for the chance to live." In Emily's Twitter account, she wrote, "For the first time in 2 years, I've gone 12 hours without pain. I'm so tired of hurting, but I need to keep going." Her resilience was clear, despite the immense challenges she faced. This message expressed her determination to cherish life despite the significant suffering she faced. Her social media posts often reflected her struggle to stay positive in the midst of her illness, highlighting her hope even when times were tough. Emily was remembered as a kind and caring young woman who made an effort to stay connected with her community. She loved music and sang at the local church whenever her health allowed. Many residents of Langley have fond memories of her performances, but as her health declined, she was able to attend church less often. Despite her challenges, she remained generous and thoughtful, baking with her mother, sharing treats with neighbors. On her good days, she also helped local children with their homework. Laurel, Emily's mother, did everything possible to support her daughter. In a Twitter post, she expressed her feelings, saying, "Emily is back in the hospital, praying to God they can help her. I feel so helpless." These words showed the deep pain and despair she experienced while watching her daughter suffer. Although Laurel was emotionally drained, she was determined not to give up and continuously sought ways to improve Emily's condition. Similarly, Shelley, Randy's sister, could not predict the tragedy that would occur. The family never imagined their lives would be changed in such a devastating manner. Over the past year, Randy often shared with friends the heavy burden and stress he felt due to Emily's illness. No one could have predicted that he would eventually become so emotionally fragile that he would consider harming his family. Randy struggled to manage the emotional strain. Despite their shared despair, the family attempted to support one another, but their situation continued to worsen, leading to an unforeseen and tragic outcome. With the details now revealed, it is obvious that feelings of despair, hidden challenges, and deep hopelessness led to an unexpected tragedy. The story of the Jansen family serves as a sobering reminder that even within seemingly stable homes, deep pain can linger just beneath the surface, occasionally breaking out in unpredictable ways. It was a quiet evening in Dallas when Amber Geiger, a seasoned police officer, entered the wrong apartment. What happened next would send shockwaves through the community and change the course of two families' lives forever. But was it truly a tragic mistake, or was something darker at play? As the courtroom drama unfolded, questions about race, power, and accountability took center stage. What happened that night? Botham Shem Jean was born on September 29, 1991, in Castries, the capital of the island nation of St. Lucia. His parents, Allison and Bertram Jean, were deeply religious, they members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Raised in such a faith-driven environment, Botham's upbringing instilled in him strong moral values, including honesty, tolerance, and a desire to help others. From a young age, Botham stood out among his peers. His parents raised him with a strong sense of responsibility, a focus on education. In school, he demonstrated exceptional abilities in mathematics and music. At a young age, Botham began singing in the church choir, where his deep and moving voice immediately caught attention. Music became an important part of his life, and the church was a place where he felt supported. After finishing school, Botham decided to continue his education in the United States. He chose to attend Harding University in Texas, where he pursued a degree in accounting. This decision marked an important milestone in his life. Moving to the U.S. opened up new opportunities for professional growth and personal connections. After graduation, Botham secured a job as an accountant in Dallas. His career quickly flourished. His colleagues highly valued his professionalism and work ethic. For Botham, working at PricewaterhouseCoopers wasn't just a career step, it was an opportunity to contribute to society and provide for his family. He supported his parents, helped the youth in his community in St. Lucia. He dreamed of advancing further in his career. His co-workers remembered him as someone who always brought positivity and inspiration to the team. But it wasn't just his professional life that mattered to Botham. He was actively involved in the life of his church in Dallas, where he was part of the music group and often spent time with friends from the community. He found joy in simple things like cooking dinners for his friends, organizing parties to maintain friendships, and support with others. His life was filled with plans for the future. Amber Geiger, on the other hand, came from a small town near Dallas. She was born on August 9, 1988, grew up in a family where discipline and hard work were strongly emphasized. From an early age, Amber dreamed of becoming a police officer. Her father worked in local law enforcement, and she knew she wanted to follow in his footsteps to help people, bring order to society. She pursued this dream after high school by enrolling in the police academy. She worked hard and demonstrated the discipline, focus needed for a career in law enforcement. After graduating from the academy, Amber began her career with the Dallas Police Department, where she eventually became an officer. Her colleagues described her as determined and hardworking, though she often expressed frustration with the emotional strain and high stress of her job. The life of a police officer is always filled with risk and stress. Amber was no exception. She often found herself in situations that required quick decisions, where her reaction had to be immediate. These working conditions took a toll on her emotional state. Over time, she became more withdrawn and cautious in her relationships with others, preferring to spend her free time alone to recharge. Amber Geiger was dedicated to her profession, but her life was full of contradictions. She tried to hide her vulnerabilities, but those who knew her well could see that she often felt lonely and sometimes even lost in the world. Despite her strong, determined character, her internal struggles and fatigue from the constant pressure made her life less stable. She would often return home late, exhausted and emotionally drained, which perhaps played a critical role in the tragic events that unfolded later. After moving to Dallas, Amber purchased an apartment in the South Side Flats complex near her job. She believed that living close to work would allow her to rest better and minimize commuting time. Although she intended for her life in Dallas to be a fresh start, it did not bring the peace she sought. Instead, work stress and emotional strain became overwhelming. It started to dominate her daily life. She frequently struggled to cope with her increasing fatigue. On September 6, 2018, Botham Jean began his day like any other. He woke up early, went to his office in downtown Dallas. It was another hectic day filled with meetings and preparing client reports. Botham was known for his dedication to his work. That day was no exception. His colleagues saw his positive attitude and the smile he spread to those around him. No one could have anticipated that this would be the last day of his life. After finishing work, Botham returned to his apartment in the South Side Flats complex in Dallas. For him, this apartment was a peaceful retreat where he could relax after a hectic day. That evening, he opted for a simple routine, cooking dinner, listening to his favorite music, and unwinding. Cooking was a beloved hobby of his, helped him manage the stress from work. On the other hand, Amber Geiger was just completing a 13-hour shift at the police station. That day had been particularly challenging, filled with calls, patrolling, and paperwork that left her completely exhausted. She felt an overwhelming fatigue that made every part of her body heavy. She just wanted to get home quickly and sleep. As soon as her shift ended, Amber rushed home, looking forward to collapsing into bed for some much-needed rest. Amber arrived at her apartment complex, where she lived on the 3rd floor. As she made her way to her apartment, she was distracted by messages on her phone, recalling her day. She accidentally took the elevator to the 4th floor instead of the 3rd. The apartment doors looked similar, and in her fatigue, she didn't realize she was at the wrong unit. She noticed that the door to Botham Jean's apartment was slightly open, which made her uneasy. Confused and tired, she feared that someone might have broken into her apartment. Amber took out her service weapon, focused only on the need to protect herself. Amber pushed the door open, stepped inside. Botham, who was in his apartment preparing dinner, heard the noise and turned to the door, feeling confused about what was occurring. Mistaking him for an intruder, Amber fired her gun twice without thinking. Botham collapsed to the floor. When Amber turned on the lights, she realized her mistake. She saw an unfamiliar man lying in a pool of blood, suddenly understood that she had entered the wrong apartment. Overcome by panic and horror, she rushed to Botham to try to help him. She called 911, urgently explaining the situation to the operator, desperately stating that she had entered the wrong apartment unit and had shot someone. Her voice shook with fear and regret as she begged Botham to hold on, repeatedly saying she hadn't intended for this to happen. While waiting for emergency services, Amber tried to stop the bleeding, but her attempts were unsuccessful. Neighbors, alarmed by the gunshots and cries, began to enter the hallway. Some called the police to report the gunfire coming from the apartment complex. When paramedics arrived, they worked to save Botham, but his injuries were too severe. He did not survive. That evening, a young man with a bright future had his life tragically cut short. After the shooting, Amber was arrested and placed in the patrol car of Dallas Police Sergeant Brianna Valentine. Sergeant Mike Mata, Valentine's superior and president of the Dallas Police Association, then approached her. He instructed Valentine to turn off the in-car camera, which recorded audio, so he could speak privately with Amber. Valentine complied with this request. During Amber's trial, Mata testified that it was standard procedure to turn off the camera to protect Amber's attorney-client privilege, as she intended to call her attorney. Amber's defense attorney supported Mata's claim, but prosecutors disagreed, arguing that turning off the camera was inappropriate and suggested that Amber received preferential treatment due to her status as a police officer. Valentine testified that she locked Amber in the patrol car to prevent her from being implicated. However, surveillance footage later showed Mata allowing Amber to exit the patrol car, conversing with her and permitting her to mingle with friends and other officers. At the time, Dallas police policy allowed officers to deactivate recording devices if they believed there would be no further evidence or law enforcement value. Botham's family and the community claimed that turning off the camera led to the loss of important evidence. Valentine stated she would not have turned off the camera had she realized Amber was off duty during the shooting. Mata denied any wrongdoing and expressed openness to an internal affairs investigation. In July 2020, prosecutors referred Mata to a grand jury for tampering with evidence, but the grand jury chose not to indict him. A spokesperson for the Dallas police stated that an internal affairs investigation into Mata's conduct would continue. As investigators collected evidence, the public started to engage in discussions about the incident. The case led to widespread outrage, particularly regarding racial issues and concerns about police misconduct. Botham Jean, being black, was viewed by many as another victim of unfair treatment and bias from law enforcement. This raised questions about whether Botham's race influenced Amber's mistaken belief that he was an intruder, which led her to shoot him without first assessing the situation. Botham's family was heartbroken by the tragedy. His mother, Allison Jean, was in St. Lucia when she received the news. It was a devastating moment for her. Her son, who had moved to the U.S. to create a better life, was killed in his own apartment. Allison started to seek justice for her son, urging both the public and authorities to conduct a thorough and fair investigation. She remembered Botham as a kind, responsible, dedicated person who never posed any threat to others. In the days after the incident, there was a surge of conflicting reports and rumors. The media provided extensive coverage. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some people felt that Amber Guyger had made a tragic error, while others believed her actions were influenced by bias and a poor assessment of the situation. This led to protests in Dallas and other cities, where demonstrators called for justice for Botham Jean and his family. Witnesses from the apartment complex reported hearing screams and gunshots. Some tried to understand what was happening, but no one anticipated such a tragic outcome. Investigators gathered evidence, reviewed surveillance footage, and analyzed witness statements to piece together the events of that day. They aimed to determine if this was truly a tragic mistake or if other factors played a role in the devastating result. After Amber's arrest, the case moved into a lengthy, complex phase of investigation and trial preparation. Amber was charged with manslaughter. Her attorneys argued that her actions were a tragic, unintentional mistake due to extreme exhaustion from a long shift. However, the prosecution asserted that Amber's behavior was unacceptable for a trained police officer who should carefully assess situations and avoid unnecessary use of force. Key evidence in the case included surveillance footage from the apartment complex where Botham Jean and Amber Guyger lived. The recordings showed Amber arriving at the building, mistakenly going to the wrong floor, and approaching Botham's apartment. Investigators highlighted that she did not pay enough attention to realize she was on the wrong floor. Additionally, phone records were significant. Just before the incident, Amber had been texting a colleague with whom she had a personal relationship. Prosecutors argued that these messages might have distracted her and led to her mistake in entering the wrong apartment. In contrast, the defense minimized the relevance of the texts, asserting that they were unrelated to the incident and could not have impacted her actions. Over several months, investigators collected evidence and interviewed witnesses. Neighbors in the apartment complex reported hearing shouting and gunshots. Some mentioned hearing voices before the shots were fired, indicating there might have been an argument between Amber and Botham. However, the witnesses had differing accounts, making it challenging to create a clear understanding of the events that took place. Forensic examinations were carried out simultaneously. Experts carefully studied the firearm involved in the shooting, the bullet's trajectory, and other physical evidence to establish the locations of Amber and Botham during the incident. A key point of debate was the position of Botham's body and the bullet's angle. The prosecution argued that the evidence indicated Botham was not a threat to Amber, whereas the defense maintained that she acted in self-defense. In September 2019, a widely publicized trial began, attracting significant attention from the public and media. The courtroom was filled with journalists, family members, and friends of Botham Jean, along with supporters of both the prosecution and defense. The case was expected to be complex, addressing issues of police responsibility, personal accountability, and racial justice. The trial commenced with opening statements from both sides. Prosecutors contended that Amber Guyger's actions were not merely a mistake, but rather a result of her negligence as a police officer. They stressed that any officer should be especially cautious when using a firearm, particularly in situations where there is no threat. Moreover, they highlighted that Botham was in his own home and did not pose any danger to Amber. The defense focused on the notion that Amber was extremely exhausted and confused, motivated by fear for her own safety. Her lawyers aimed to present her as someone who made a tragic error without any intention to harm. They also emphasized her clean record in law enforcement to gain sympathy from the jury. Over several weeks, various witnesses, experts, and family members of both the defendant and the victim shared their testimonies. A particularly emotional moment in the trial occurred when Botham's mother, Allison Jean, took the witness stand. She reminisced about her son's dreams and future aspirations, painting him as a kind, compassionate individual. Her heartfelt words resonated deeply with everyone in the courtroom, underlining the immense loss her family experienced. Botham's brother, Brant Jean, also testified, delivering a statement that became widely discussed. He publicly forgave Amber Guyger, even requested to hug her. This act elicited mixed reactions. While some viewed it as a remarkable display of kindness and forgiveness, others believed it should not overshadow the pursuit of justice. Among the evidence shown in court were surveillance video and an audio recording of Amber's 911 call made after the attack. In the recording, she sounds panicked, repeatedly saying she entered the wrong apartment and never meant to harm anyone. Expert witnesses analyzed the bullet's trajectory, the position of Botham Jean's body, and the events leading up to the shooting. Prosecution experts argued that the bullet's path indicated Botham was in a relaxed position, likely sitting or just getting up from his couch when he was shot. This contradicted the defense's claim that he was moving toward Amber and posed a threat. The defense tried to challenge these findings by saying that the bullet's trajectory could not be definitively established due to insufficient data. During the trial, the public paid close attention to the case's developments. Protests and rallies persisted, with activists demanding a fair sentence for Amber Guyger, advocating for police reform to prevent similar incidents in the future. There were widespread calls for improvements in police training, particularly in decision-making during high-pressure situations, and for greater accountability for errors that result in tragic consequences. Amber Guyger testified, sharing her perspective on the events from that night. She described returning home after a long shift, she feeling exhausted, confused. She claimed she truly thought she was in her own apartment, believed Botham was an intruder. While testifying, she became emotional and stated that she never meant to harm anyone and considered it a terrible mistake, one that she would have to live with forever. Her testimony was heartfelt and appeared genuine to some. The question of what the appropriate sentence should be became a key focus in the final stage of the trial. Prosecutors argued that Amber Guyger should be convicted of manslaughter, stating that her actions resulted in the death of an innocent person and that a police officer who cannot accurately assess a situation should not remain in the police force. In contrast, the defense sought a lighter sentence, emphasizing the absence of intent and claiming that Amber already felt immense guilt for her mistake. After several days of discussion, the jury was finally ready to deliver their verdict in Amber Guyger's case. The courtroom was filled with tension as everyone awaited the judge and jury's decision on whether the former police officer was guilty of causing Botham Jean's death. For many, this trial symbolized not just a personal tragedy but also significant issues in American society, such as racial bias, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability in law enforcement. On October 1, 2019, Amber Guyger was convicted of murder. The jury deliberated for 6 hours to return a murder verdict. The jury also considered the lesser charge of manslaughter. She is the first Dallas police officer to be convicted of murder since the 1973 killing of Santos Rodriguez. This decision surprised many, especially since the prosecution had originally aimed for a manslaughter conviction. The murder charge had more severe penalties and a longer prison sentence. In the courtroom, people expressed relief and held quiet celebrations. This verdict marked an important step toward justice for Botham's family and their supporters who endured the lengthy and difficult trial. On October 2, 2019, Amber Guyger was sentenced to 10 years in prison after a jury deliberated for an hour. In her remarks, the judge acknowledged the case's complexity and tragedy, noting that both sides had suffered significant losses. She pointed out that Guyger had made a serious mistake that resulted in an innocent person's death. Despite the weight of the sentence, many believed that 10 years was too lenient for such a grave error. While some accepted the court's decision, others felt it was inadequate. Activists and supporters of the Jean family argued that the sentence did not adequately reflect the seriousness of the crime and was insufficient punishment for the life lost. Protests continued in Dallas and other cities, with many calling for more reforms in the criminal justice and law enforcement systems. This case became a symbol of the fight for justice and highlighted the ongoing challenges Black Americans face with law enforcement. Amber Guyger was in a state of shock after the verdict and sentencing. She repeatedly insisted that she did not intend to harm anyone and that it was a tragic mistake. Her attorneys filed an appeal to reduce her sentence, arguing that 10 years was too severe for someone who acted out of confusion, stress, and exhaustion. Nevertheless, once the trial ended, Guyger was taken into custody to begin serving her sentence. Botham Jean's family expressed their gratitude to everyone who supported them during the lengthy trial. His mother, Allison, mentioned that while the verdict brought some sense of closure, it could never bring her son back. She stressed the need for systemic reforms in the justice system and law enforcement to prevent similar tragedies in the future. She continued to advocate for changes within police departments, hoping that her son's case would inspire meaningful progress. On October 16, 2019, Amber's attorneys filed an appeal requesting a new trial. On August 7, 2020, they filed another appeal, alleging that there was insufficient evidence to convict her of murder. This appeal sought to have the conviction either overturned or reduced to negligent manslaughter, accompanied by a new hearing for sentencing on the lesser charge. On January 13, 2021, the Dallas City Council voted unanimously to rename approximately 4 miles of South Lamar Street from Interstate 30 to the South Central Expressway as Botham-Jean Boulevard. This street passes by Jean's former apartment building and the Dallas Police Headquarters. On August 5, 2021, the Fifth Court of Appeals of Texas upheld Amber Guyger's murder conviction, unanimously concluding that the jury's verdict was reasonable and that Amber's own testimony supported the murder conviction. On November 17 of that year, the court withdrew its earlier opinion but again upheld her murder conviction on similar grounds, stating that her defense, which claimed she had accidentally entered the wrong apartment, did not justify the lesser charge of negligent manslaughter. Her appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the highest court for criminal cases in the state, was denied. Simultaneously, in response to the police car camera controversy, Texas State Representative Carl O. Sherman sponsored Texas House Bill 929, known as the Botham-Jean Act, to increase police accountability. The bill prohibits police from disabling body-worn cameras at any time while they are actively engaged in an investigation. It also requires law enforcement policies regarding body-worn cameras to include provisions for collecting cameras, video, and audio recordings as evidence. The bill goes into effect in September 2021. Amber is currently being held at the Patrick O'Daniel Unit, formerly the Mountain View Unit. She is eligible for release in September 2024 after serving half of her sentence, although her full sentence is effective until September 2029. Amber was subsequently denied parole in October 2024. She will be eligible for release again in 2026. On November 20, 2024, a civil trial jury awarded the Jean family $98.65 million, including approximately $60 million in punitive damages and $38.6 million in compensatory damages, in a wrongful death claim against Amber Guyger, a figure nearly double the amount the family had sought. The family said Dallas police had inadequately trained Amber and also named the city of Dallas as a defendant, but the city was dismissed from the lawsuit, leaving Amber fully liable for the damages. Amber initially represented herself but did not appear in court and declined to provide legal representation. The family said they would donate any compensation they received to the Botham-Jean Foundation, which could include proceeds from any film or book deals Amber made. The family acknowledged they were unlikely to receive the full amount. The case of Botham-Jean significantly influenced public perception and sparked a national debate about policing. It exemplified the systemic issues present in law enforcement, particularly regarding the treatment of Black individuals. In response to widespread public outcry, many states began to consider new laws aimed at improving police training, especially in how officers handle force and interact with the community. There were increasing demands for greater accountability for police officers and for mandatory training that emphasizes racial and cultural understanding. Furthermore, Botham-Jean's case led to the formation of organizations and funds dedicated to assisting the families of victims of police misconduct, advocating for reforms in law enforcement. These groups not only provided legal and emotional support but also launched campaigns to raise awareness about racial discrimination and the misuse of power. Allison actively engaged in these initiatives, sharing her personal story to advocate for justice and systemic change. Meanwhile, Amber Guyger remained in prison, waiting for the results of her appeal. This case devastated two families and had a significant impact on American society. The tragic error that caused Botham-Jean's death highlighted the urgent need for reform and emphasized the critical importance of law enforcement officials making careful, responsible decisions in life and death scenarios. The case of Botham-Jean and Amber Guyger is one of the most talked about and significant cases in recent U.S. history. It highlights the serious consequences of poor judgment, especially from those in positions of authority. Many believe that justice was only partially served. The case raised important questions about equality and accountability in America. Ana Knežević, a U.S. citizen, had moved to Madrid after 13 years of marriage to take some time for herself and start anew. While in Madrid, she was involved in finalizing her divorce, making future plans, and keeping in touch with her family and friends. On February 2nd, Ana made her last known phone call. The very next day, messages began arriving from her phone, raising immediate concerns. One of her close friends quickly noticed that the texts did not sound like Ana. Ana was born in 1983 in Colombia to a family that valued traditional Balkan customs. Her upbringing emphasized the importance of family, discipline, and education. Growing up, she was known for her neatness, organizational abilities, and independence, traits that remained with her throughout her life. Later, Ana moved to the United States, became a U.S. citizen. Living in here opened up new career and personal growth opportunities for her. She became fluent in English, honed her professional skills, gradually became a part of her local community. Ana always prioritized education, self-improvement. She choosing to live a quiet and unassuming life away from the public eye. In the early 2000s, Ana met David Knežević in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Their relationship progressed quickly. They then moved in together and got married. As their personal relationship grew, they became business partners as well, founding a company focused on tech support and IT solutions. David took care of the technical aspects of the business, while Ana managed organization and long-term strategy. Eventually, they began investing in real estate, acquiring properties throughout Florida. From the outside, their life together seemed stable. They had a thriving business, a home, and a comfortable lifestyle, giving the impression of a couple on the path to financial independence. However, underlying issues were developing. Friends and acquaintances were largely unaware of the growing problems in their marriage. Over time, serious conflicts arose, including financial disagreements and deeper personal issues. By 2023, Ana and David's marriage had deteriorated to a breaking point. Those close to them reported they were in the midst of a separation, with asset division becoming the main focus. This included both their tech business and several real estate properties. Although they had not yet finalized the divorce, both were already preparing for it. Negotiations had started, disagreements emerged, and tensions were rising. With the conflict escalating, Ana chose to temporarily leave the U.S. In December 2023, she moved to Madrid, renting an apartment in the upscale Salamanca neighborhood. She explained that this move was essential for distancing herself from the stress, gaining clarity, and closing a chapter in her life. She repeatedly stated that she wasn't seeking a new relationship or distractions. Her goal was simply to regain her balance. After settling in Spain, Ana made her new place feel like home, began therapy, maintained close contact with friends, and started planning short trips across Europe. Her time in Madrid wasn't an escape, it was a way to step back from the overwhelming conflict she faced in Florida. However, just a few weeks into this new life, an unexpected event brought her independent journey to a sudden and troubling end. After moving to Madrid, Ana maintained a close friendship with her longtime friend, Sana Remo, who was living in Florida. They talked every day, despite the time difference. Their friendship had a strong foundation, and they often traveled together. Ana trusted Sana completely, often sharing her thoughts, feelings, and daily experiences with her. Their text messages showed that Ana was open about her adjustment to life in Spain. In mid-January 2024, the two friends traveled to Austria together. After their trip, they made plans to meet again in Madrid, with Sana set to arrive on February 8th. Before that, Ana had arranged a short trip to Barcelona with another friend on February 5th. They had already booked their tickets for the trip, which was not just a vacation but also included attending a conference. Ana had discussed their plans and was excited about the upcoming journey. On the evening of February 2nd, Ana had a phone call with Sana around 8:30 p.m. local time. They spoke for over an hour. Ana mentioned that she planned to stay in that night and had no plans to go out. She appeared calm and talked about her day, sharing details about errands and household chores. Their conversation ended around 10 p.m., which is the last confirmed time anyone had contact with Anna. The next morning, February 3rd, Sana received a text from Anna's number. It said, "I met an amazing man. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We're heading there. The signal might be weak. I'll call you when I return." Soon after, another message arrived. "After my therapy session yesterday, I took a walk. He approached me on the street, and we instantly connected. I've never felt like this before." Sana felt something was off about the messages. She knew Anna well. She was cautious and would never leave town with a stranger without informing someone. Sana responded immediately, but there were no further replies. Her calls also went unanswered. At first, she tried to convince herself that Anna might indeed be in a place with poor reception. However, her concern quickly escalated into alarm. That same day, another friend of Anna's received similar messages. The text felt strange. The wording was flat and lacked Anna's usual style. What struck her as odd was the dialect, which sounded very different from Anna's typical speech. They mentioned that the text seemed like it had been translated from another language using an automatic translator. The theory was logical. The message sounded awkward and overly formal, which made him uncomfortable. Both Sana and Anna's friend quickly figured out that Anna hadn't written those messages herself. They compared them to their previous conversations and immediately noticed the difference. Anna's actual texts were vibrant and filled with her distinctive expressions, none of which were present in these messages. Furthermore, the content of the messages didn't match her recent actions at all. The next day, Sana did everything she could to contact Anna. She reached out to their mutual friends, tried tracking her location using apps, and even called local hospitals. However, nothing worked. Although Anna's phone was on, she did not answer. After, Sana quickly contacted the Madrid police. She explained that Anna's sudden silence was very unusual and that the messages had a tone that Anna wouldn't normally use. However, the authorities did not act right away. They viewed Anna as an adult who had the right to make her own choices, including leaving town without notifying anyone. Officially, her disappearance was not deemed suspicious. Police stated they could not start an investigation without evidence that Anna was missing against her will. They believed the unusual texts and her lack of communication were insufficient. The only definitive point they recognized was February 5th, the day Anna was supposed to travel to Barcelona. Authorities indicated that if she did not arrive at the station or reach out by that date, her absence would be considered a formal missing persons case. As a result, no significant actions were taken for 3 days after Anna stopped responding. The police did not check her phone records, search her apartment, or look into her recent activities. After Anna went missing, her friends tried hard to find her. They called and texted her repeatedly and even contacted people in Madrid, but nothing worked. On February 5th, Anna was supposed to be at the train station but didn't show up, and none of her phones were answering. It was only then that authorities officially declared her a missing person. That same day, a request was made to the court for permission to search her apartment and access her phone records. However, the request was denied by a judge due to a lack of evidence suggesting any crime had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, loud noises, or aggressive behavior. Therefore, there was no legal basis for allowing a search or accessing her private information. Days later, when law enforcement entered Anna's apartment, they found that the door was locked from the outside. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her belongings were in order, there were no signs of a struggle, and nothing valuable was missing. However, the fact that her home was undisturbed raised serious concerns about her disappearance. It indicated that she might have either left voluntarily and never returned or that someone took her out without breaking in. Anna's brother, Felipe Anal, kept in close contact with Spanish authorities but pointed out that coordinating internationally was difficult. He shared with reporters that the investigators in Madrid had limited English proficiency and that U.S. officials had not yet provided significant assistance. He expressed worry about the lack of communication among Spanish police, the FBI, and the U.S. consulate. Despite the disappearance of a U.S. citizen under mysterious circumstances abroad, the initial days following Anna's vanishing were poorly managed. This was a critical time when they could have gathered fresh evidence, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed phone activity or camera footage. Instead, valuable time was wasted, assuming Anna left on her own. This assumption delayed a prompt response and may have impacted the investigation's course. On the 4 days later after Anna Knežević disappeared, staff at her apartment complex provided police with crucial information that changed the investigation. This information was about the night of February 2nd, which was the last time Anna had been in contact. A building administrator reported that several surveillance cameras at the entrance and along the building's facade had been disabled around 9:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before Anna stopped responding to her friend. When security personnel reviewed the recordings, they noticed that the camera lenses had been intentionally covered. The footage showed a person in dark clothing and a motorcycle helmet approaching the outdoor cameras. He spraying paint directly onto the lenses to obscure them. Afterward, he waited for someone to exit the building, which allowed him to slip inside. Once inside, he targeted the camera in the elevator area, spraying paint over its lens as well. This act appeared to be deliberate. The individual seemed to know where the surveillance devices were and how to disable them quickly, discreetly. The building staff confirmed that the security systems had been tampered with. They provided copies of the footage to Spanish investigators, which was the first visual evidence indicating possible outside interference. However, identifying the person in the video was impossible due to his helmet and dark clothing. The individual's face was completely covered, and their body type did not offer enough clues for clear identification. Nevertheless, forensic experts noted a few important details. The person's eyes, part of their forehead, and brow line were briefly visible. Investigators believe that this person planned the act meticulously. He brought spray paint and wore equipment intended to prevent leaving any traces behind. His appearance in the footage matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance, raising further suspicions. The targeting of the building's surveillance system and the disabling of specific cameras indicated that the individual was familiar with the layout of the premises, suggesting this was not a random act. It was planned and concerning. Further investigation showed that the exterior camera was spray painted in about 30 seconds, and the interior camera was disabled even more quickly. Every action taken was intentional and confident, with no sign of hesitation or looking around. This led investigators to conclude that the individual knew how long the actions would take and executed them with precision. A staff member confirmed that this man appeared on camera just as residents were leaving. He seized the opportunity to enter the building, indicating that he did not have authorized access. Without a key card or entry code, he was not recognized as a resident. He took a direct route from the entrance to the camera near the elevator, with no stops. The video footage quickly caught the attention of both law enforcement and Anna's friends. Sana, who had reached Madrid by that time, shared the video with journalists, which sparked public interest in the case. Media outlets began to speculate that the man in the helmet might be linked to Anna's disappearance, but his identity and motives remained unknown. After an image from the surveillance footage was made public, the FBI started its own analysis. They noted that even low-resolution footage could be analyzed to compare visual elements with their databases. They concentrated on key facial features that were still visible despite the helmet, such as the shape of the eyes, the space between the eyebrows, the brow ridges, and the upper facial structure. These aspects can often be recognized even when partially hidden. Public curiosity about the footage intensified when it was revealed that the paint used to disable the cameras was from a specific brand, which later appeared in other parts of the investigation. Investigators did not release this detail right away, but they found that the spray can involve match the type and packaging shown in a store surveillance footage. This footage captured a man who looked similar to someone seen at Anna's building buying the same spray can. After Anna stopped answering calls and messages, her friend Sana reached out to her husband, David Knežević, on February 4th. During their conversation, Sana learned that David was in Florida. She proposed that they travel to Madrid together to help search for Anna, and David agreed, even discussing a specific flight from Miami for the next day. However, when the time arrived, he did not show up and later claimed to be in Serbia. This unexpected turn left Anna's friends confused. David was aware that his wife had gone missing under mysterious circumstances in a foreign country. He had the ability to fly to Spain, yet he chose to go to Serbia instead. This decision was puzzling. Instead of participating in the search, he went to a third country where his relatives live. Questions naturally arose. Why didn't he go to the location where his wife disappeared? Why didn't he join the search effort? Sana grew increasingly concerned about David's behavior. While he did not openly dismiss her, his reactions felt distant and confusing. His actions seemed illogical. Although the first few days were critical, he did not attempt to go to Madrid. He believed there was nothing he could do in Spain because he did not speak Spanish, had no place to stay, and was unfamiliar with the city. His lawyer supported this view, explaining to reporters that going to a country without any local connections would not be useful. He also mentioned that David was worried about Anna's disappearance but felt that being there in person would not make a difference. After Anna went missing, David hired a lawyer in Florida. The lawyer reported that David had been in contact with the FBI and had shared all necessary information, including credit card statements and his efforts to find legal assistance in Spain. However, none of these actions involved him participating in the search directly. Despite providing some information, David stayed distant and avoided making any public comments. After Florida police confirmed that David reported a theft in January, several questions emerged. He alleged that $5,000 in cash and personal items were stolen from his unlocked car. In the morning, he found the passenger door slightly open. Security cameras near his home did not capture the theft, and the police could not identify any suspects. Although there was no initial connection to Anna's case, the report became suspicious in light of subsequent events. David's trip to Serbia created further controversy. He asserted that he left the U.S. before Anna's disappearance and remained abroad during that time. However, Saw mentioned a phone call with him on February 4th, in which he stated he was in Florida, suggesting he might have flown to Serbia after that conversation. There was no official confirmation from border control authorities at that time. David's attorney provided his passport as evidence that he had left earlier, but these inconsistencies raised doubts and increased suspicion regarding his involvement. The situation became more complicated due to a property dispute that had intensified months before Anna disappeared. With shared assets about to be divided, suspicion was understandable. This divorce was not just ordinary, it involved significant financial stakes and joint possessions. Anna's friends noted that their relationship had turned hostile. In contrast, David and his lawyer claimed the divorce was amicable, arguing that they had simply grown apart. At that time, David had not been charged with any crime and was located outside the U.S. However, his absence during the search for Anna and inconsistencies in his statements raised concerns among investigators. While David insisted he had no involvement in Anna's disappearance, a growing list of circumstantial evidence caught the attention of both police and the FBI. In May 2024, U.S. authorities arrested David at Miami International Airport, just after he arrived on an international flight. He was taken into custody by the Diplomatic Security Service and the FBI without any issues. This was the first official action that connected him to Anna's disappearance. He faced charges related to the abduction of a U.S. citizen outside the country, based on a series of indirect but related pieces of evidence uncovered during a multinational investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence was surveillance footage collected by investigators in Spain and Serbia. At a store close to Anna's apartment in Madrid, cameras captured a man who looked like David buying a can of spray paint and duct tape. Forensic analysis showed that the spray paint was the same brand used to disable the security cameras in Anna's building, as the label and color were identical. Investigators viewed this as evidence of premeditation. Additionally, authorities tracked a rental car used by David in Serbia. GPS data indicated that the car entered Spain, traveled through Madrid, and then moved into northern Italy before returning to Serbia. The precise tracking of this route led investigators to believe that Anna's body may have been transported in that vehicle. A stop in a wooded area of northern Italy raised particular interest, prompting coordinated searches by both Italian and Spanish law enforcement. As of that time, no remains had been discovered, but the theory that Anna's body was transported remained a central focus of the investigation. A key piece of evidence came from surveillance footage in Anna's apartment building. Investigators released a video showing a man, matching David's physical description, exiting the elevator with a large suitcase on the same night Anna disappeared. Though his face was obscured, the timing and situation aligned with other findings in the investigation. Authorities suspected that the suitcase might have been used to remove Anna's body from the apartment. David's rental car, which he had picked up in Serbia, was eventually returned to the rental agency. An inspection revealed that the car's mileage had increased by over 4,800 miles. Additionally, it had been modified with tinted windows, which were not part of the original rental terms. These changes raised suspicions. Investigators also found that the car was operating with false license plates during a time it was believed to have been used for cross-border travel. Spanish police recorded a sighting of a similar vehicle near the location where Anna disappeared, but they could not identify the driver because of the tinted windows and fake plates. The FBI linked several crucial pieces of evidence: the purchase of materials, disruptions to surveillance systems, the travel route, elevator footage showing a suitcase, and modifications to a car. Their report indicated that all the evidence suggested a planned criminal act and an effort to conceal it. The official statement referred to the case as the abduction of a U.S. citizen abroad, involving a U.S. national. Although no body was found, authorities believed the evidence was strong enough to justify an arrest. David was taken to a federal detention center in South Florida. His lawyers claimed he had cooperated with authorities, willingly shared information, and did not plan to escape. However, prosecutors contended that the substantial circumstantial evidence and the case's context created a significant risk that he might flee. David's arrest was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Until then, he had evaded authorities and avoided speaking publicly. Now, he was the focus of a federal case. The next step was to decide if he would remain in custody until the trial. After his arrest in Miami, David's first court appearance centered on his request for bail. The judge denied the request, citing a high risk of flight, and noted that the actions surrounding Anna's disappearance seemed well planned and executed. The judge highlighted the planning and sophistication as reasons for keeping David in detention. David's legal team appealed the decision, arguing that he posed no danger and did not intend to flee. They proposed a substantial bail amount, an ankle monitor, a travel ban, and home confinement. The defense emphasized David's long-term residence in the U.S., his clean record, and his willingness to cooperate with authorities. However, the court stood. The defense's main argument was that David could not have been in Spain when Anna disappeared. His lawyer presented passport stamps and travel records to show he arrived in Serbia well before February 2nd, claiming that David physically could not have been in Madrid at the time of the incident. The lawyer also noted that David did not speak Spanish, had no ties or residence in Spain, which would have made it difficult for him to plan such an act. Prosecutors were firmly opposed to the defense's claims. They pointed out that David's travels across Europe closely matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance. The evidence included the rental car's route, purchases of specific items, and other activities that suggested he had premeditated the act. Although there was no direct evidence, the prosecution insisted that the strong circumstantial evidence pointed to his involvement. To bolster their case, they presented the court with message transcripts, surveillance footage, phone records, and an analysis of David's behavior. It was argued that some of David's actions could not be mere coincidences. The judge acknowledged that the prosecution had built a substantial body of circumstantial evidence that created a convincing narrative. Although Anna's body had not been found, the evidence indicated that her disappearance involved aggressive intent and likely implicated David specifically. The judge addressed the defense's claim that the evidence was inadequate by clarifying that the requirement for bail is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. This means the court does not need absolute proof of guilt, only a significant likelihood of risk, like the chance of fleeing or obstructing the investigation. Therefore, the court chose to keep David in custody. His legal team announced they would appeal the bail denial and have filed a formal complaint with the district court, which can review the decisions of lower courts. As the main trial was approaching, David stayed in federal custody. The trial was expected to be lengthy, including expert testimony and international collaboration, and was likely to receive significant media coverage. Investigators began focusing on a woman, identified by the FBI, who might have helped create the suspicious text messages that seemed to come from Ana on February 3rd. This woman, fluent in Spanish, had previously interacted with David via a dating app. The texts sent from Ana's phone were in Spanish and did not match her usual writing style. As mentioned earlier, her close friends quickly noticed that the phrasing resembled a machine translation, a viewpoint later confirmed by linguistic forensic analysis. The defense maintained that there was no direct evidence linking David to the crime. His attorneys highlighted that no one had seen him at Ana's apartment, and there was no evidence of contact between them on the day she went missing. They also questioned the reliability of surveillance footage that showed a man with a suitcase, arguing that it could depict someone else, as the resemblance was not conclusive. Additionally, they emphasized that there had been no official confirmation of Ana's death through forensic evidence. On April 28, 2025, it was reported that David Nezovich, who had been charged with the abduction and presumed death of his wife, Ana, was found dead in his cell at a federal detention center in Miami. His attorneys stated that he took his own life, and no suicide note was discovered. At the time of his death, he had been held without bail while awaiting trial. Ana's family expressed deep sadness and frustration over the situation. Since the trial did not take place, Ana's whereabouts remain unknown. Her loved ones believe that David took the answers about what really happened on the night she disappeared with him. Addiction can completely dominate a person's mind and will, leading them to engage in disturbing, harmful behaviors. This dependency can stem from various sources, such as alcohol, banned substance, gambling, or even unhealthy relationships, and its impacts can be equally damaging. While some people eventually recognize that they have become trapped by their addictions, many others ignore the problem. Unfortunately, this denial often leads to a worsening situation. The tragic story of Donna Munda and Ghulam Munda is not an isolated case. In 2005, it sent shockwaves through the peaceful town of Hermitage. They was well known and admired by locals, almost like celebrities. Ghulam was a respected physician who owned his clinic, while Donna was exceptionally beautiful and nearly 24 years younger than him. To everyone who knew them, they appeared to have a perfect and successful relationship. However, on a warm day in May, a single gunshot shattered this facade, revealing a much darker reality marked by betrayal, dependency, and greed. Ghulam grew up in the slums of Gujarat, India. From a young age, he faced the harsh realities of poverty and hunger. These tough conditions shaped his strong character, motivated him to escape poverty and create a better life for himself. He worked hard, focused on excellence, and aspiring to become a doctor. After completing high school, Ghulam was accepted into a medical university, where he quickly became one of the top students. His hard work paid off when he was offered an internship at a prestigious clinic in the United States. There, he worked in the urology department and quickly gained a reputation as a promising young specialist with a bright future. After his internship, Ghulam received an attractive job offer and chose to remain in the U.S. He also began applying for U.S. citizenship. By the mid-1970s, he had moved to Hermitage, Pennsylvania, a small town with a population of just over 16,000. There, he opened his own clinic specializing in urological care. His career quickly flourished. Ghulam became a top professional, utilizing advanced technology and the latest equipment in his practice. His clinic gained a reputation as one of the best in the state. He accepted the most difficult and seemingly hopeless cases, attracting patients from both near and far, including overseas. Dr. Ghulam was well respected not only for his medical skills but also for his kindness. He frequently provided free medical care and often paid for expensive medications for patients who couldn't afford them. His compassion was rooted in his own challenging childhood, which motivated him to help others in need. With a prosperous medical practice, Ghulam enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. He purchased an opulent home in a prestigious area and embraced a life filled with enjoyment. He believed in making the most of life and investing in what made him happy, such as gourmet food, traveling, luxury watches, rare collectibles, high-end cars, and spending time with attractive companions. In his 40s, Ghulam was still single when he noticed a young woman named Donna walking down the street and fell for her immediately. Donna was 24 years younger than him. She came from a religious Catholic family and had just graduated from high school when she met him. At first, she was hesitant about his interest, but over time, she accepted his generous gifts and let him pursue her. Donna's family struggled financially and couldn't afford a prestigious college education. When Ghulam found out about her situation, he offered to pay for her tuition because she wanted to work in healthcare. He supported her journey to become a registered nurse and later funded her master's degree in anesthesiology. Donna and her partner's romantic, Ghulam, relationship started several years after their initial meeting. Interestingly, even though they had strong religious values, Donna's parents accepted their relationship. They appreciated the kind, generous doctor who had helped support their daughter's education and overall well-being. Donna later became a highly skilled nurse anesthetist, secured a job at a prominent medical center. Ghulam continued to encourage her ambitions, supported her career advancement. They lived in Ghulam's luxurious home, where he gave Donna to an expensive car, lavish jewelry, and trips to fancy vacation destinations. When Donna turned 30, Ghulam, who was 54 at the time, proposed to her, and she accepted. They celebrated their engagement with an extravagant wedding ceremony that had over 150 guests, including family, friends, and many of Ghulam's business associates. It appeared that they were on their way to a long, happy life together. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Donna and Ghulam gained fame as local celebrities and were probably the richest people in their town. They enjoyed a luxurious life, traveling frequently, and the doctor generously indulged his much younger wife. They frequently attended charity galas and was always spotted together at public events. Donna chose to prioritize her career and took her time before starting a family. Ghulam supported her decision without any pressure. Many saw Donna as cheerful, friendly, and lively, which was the image she projected, until tragedy started to turn her life upside down. At 37 years old, Donna lost her father after a long illness, which hit her hard. She had always had a close bond with him, referring to herself as a daddy's girl and seeing him as her main source of strength. After he died, Donna became deeply depressed. She isolated herself from others. Ghulam did his best to support her, fulfilling all her wishes, including a trip to Hawaii to help her feel better. However, nothing seemed to work except for antidepressants, which she started taking in larger doses. Donna immersed herself in work, hoping to find solace in her daily routine, but it didn't truly alleviate her suffering. A few years later, she was diagnosed with a kidney condition that caused intense back pain. Even though her husband was a well-known urologist, he couldn't fully relieve her discomfort. The treatments only offered temporary relief, and her symptoms kept coming back, often worse than before. In her desperation, Donna started to rely heavily on strong pain medication. She began secretly taking doses from her workplace, where she was responsible for managing and administering medications. This made it easy for her to take small amounts without being noticed. She would quietly use portions meant for patients, just enough so that no one would realize. Together with her antidepressants, the prescription painkillers dulled her physical and emotional pain. Donna felt abandoned by the world and overwhelmed by her struggles. As a result, she began to distance herself from Ghulam, even though he genuinely cared for her. Things quickly deteriorated. She became increasingly dependent on her medications, to the point where she could not function without them. This led her to raise her dosages and steal more often. Eventually, her behavior attracted attention. She was caught in the act, and there was no way to deny it. Her dismissal from the clinic was shocking, and she faced multiple criminal charges. Ghulam quickly intervened to defend his wife, managed the situation to safeguard her reputation. Thanks to his actions, their friends and family never learned about Donna's problem. Rather than facing jail time, she paid a hefty fine and committed to rehabilitation at a specialized center. Ghulam chose the facility himself and organized Donna's stay, informing relatives, neighbors, and friends that she was on vacation. No one doubted him. He stayed calm, convincing, continued to appear cheerful and friendly. At the rehab center, Donna, who is now in her 40s, met a younger man named Damien Bradford, who was 23 years old. Damien had a history of multiple offenses for distributing illegal substances and ended up in rehab after a serious overdose that almost killed him. Despite their age difference, Donna and Damien quickly became very close, spent a lot of time together. They faced similar challenges. Although their relationship was unexpected, their bond deepened rapidly. What started as simple conversations turned into a passionate affair. Donna's husband was nearing 70 years old. Due to his age and health problems, their physical relationship had significantly diminished. In contrast, Damien was young, energetic, fit, and undeniably attractive. He dedicated a lot of time to the gym, often used steroids and various supplements to maintain his physique. It's unclear why Damien was attracted to a woman 2 decades his senior, but for Donna, he felt like a breath of fresh air, rekindling emotions she thought were long gone. She fully embraced this connection, quickly became emotionally invested. Even though the rehabilitation center had strict rules prohibiting romantic relationships among patients, the two secretly began dating. They found secluded spots to meet, such as storage rooms and restrooms. The thrill of being caught only seemed to strengthen their connection. Donna became so invested in the relationship that she couldn't envision her life without him. Their romance continued after they left the rehab facility. Damien was a caring partner who gave Donna plenty of attention, called her sweet names, and truly enjoyed making her feel valued. He may have developed genuine feelings for Donna, a sophisticated and self-assured woman who clearly looked after herself. At this point, Donna was not working anymore but had complete access to her husband's bank accounts and could spend as she pleased. Gulam never scrutinized her spending or asked about her expenses. Taking advantage of this, Donna started showering Damien with lavish gifts, designer clothes, and accessories, while also covering all of his living expenses. She even rented a cozy apartment for them to meet privately. As a result, Damien became financially dependent on his wealthy partner, but neither of them appeared to have any concerns about it. When warned about his wife's affair, Gulam had long suspected that something was off and noticed changes in Donna's behavior, but he had decided not to confront her about it. He realized that she was much younger and had emotional and physical needs that he could no longer fulfill. Gradually, he accepted that their passion had faded. Instead of reacting angrily, he calmly asked Donna if they should consider ending their relationship. Donna was shocked to learn that Gulam knew about her affair. She explained that it was merely a temporary distraction that happened during a tough period in her life. She had met the younger man while in rehab, when she was feeling vulnerable and needed support. He seemed to understand her struggles better than anyone else. Despite this, she assured Gulam that he was still the person she loved, promised to end her relationship with the younger man, emphasizing that he didn't truly matter to her. Gulam felt moved by her words. He chose to trust her, forgave her, and decided they could move forward together as if nothing had happened. Damien had become Donna's overwhelming dependency, which she couldn't easily escape. She felt a strong attraction to him and, in his presence, experienced feelings of youth, desire, and genuine care. Her thoughts were focused on one main goal, eliminating the obstacle to her happiness, her husband. The affair continued at the apartment she had rented for Damien. Although they were more cautious now, Gulam believed their relationship was over, while Donna planned to maintain it. When they couldn't meet in person, they stayed in constant contact, calling up to 20 times a day and exchanging hundreds of messages. Donna had no plans to let go of her boyfriend. Donna had selfish reasons for not wanting a divorce. She feared losing her financial stability. Before marrying Gulam, they signed a prenuptial agreement that would limit her settlement to $250,000 if they separated. However, after Gulam found out about her infidelity, he tried to keep the situation under control and offered to raise her settlement to $1 million. Donna turned down the offer, persuading Gulam that she still loved him and wished to save their marriage. In reality, though, Gulam's wealth had increased to nearly $12 million. Motivated by greed, Donna wanted everything, immediate access to wealth so she and Damien could live the way they wanted without restrictions. Every time they met, Donna portrayed Ghulam as a controlling tyrant who emotionally suffocated her and treated her like an object. She wanted Damien to see her husband as an enemy who deserved revenge for the emotional pain he supposedly caused her. Her manipulative stories worked well. A dark plan began to form in Donna's troubled mind, one she intended to execute with the help of her young lover. She believed that since Ghulam was much older and had several chronic health issues, his time was running out anyway. So, she thought, why not hasten the inevitable? To Donna, this seemed like the ideal solution. No one would disrupt her new life, and she would legally inherit all of Ghulam's assets, properties, and wealth as his surviving spouse. She shared her plan with Damien, offering him half of Ghulam's fortune in exchange for his help with a problem. Damien quickly agreed. The promise of a large payout clouded his judgment. Together, they began devising the crime. People who knew Ghulam were aware that he often carried a large amount of cash in his wallet. He frequently joked that anyone who tried to rob him would leave satisfied. Donna and Damien decided to exploit this, planning the crime to appear as a failed mugging that escalated into a tragic event. Developing the plan took nearly 2 months, as Donna and her accomplice carefully considered every detail to avoid mistakes. During this time, Donna portrayed the perfect devoted wife. She stayed close to her husband, accompanied him everywhere, and made sure no one suspected any issues in their marriage. Friends and neighbors genuinely thought they were a happy couple, and even Ghulam was convinced of it. Their initial attempt to execute the plan did not go well. Damien was meant to ambush Ghulam as he left the hospital and headed to his car in the parking lot. However, the area was crowded with people, prompting Damien to back out due to the fear of too many witnesses. It took them another month to devise a new strategy. This time, they aimed to attack on a deserted road where no one would be present to intervene. The plan was straightforward. Damien would follow their car at a safe distance, and Donna would stop at a designated location, pretending there was a medical emergency. They set the date for Friday, May 13, 2005. On that day, Dr. Ghulam planned to visit a neighboring state to look at a house he wanted to buy as a wedding gift for his nephew, Farak Munda. Donna offered to go with him, but her 72-year-old mother, Dorothy Smouse, who was visiting at the time, insisted on joining. Donna tried to talk her out of it, but Ghulam didn't see any issue with her coming along and agreed to let his mother-in-law participate. Damien, dressed entirely in black and wearing ski goggles to conceal his identity, waited in his car for a message from Donna indicating that their vehicle had left the house. Once he received the signal, he followed the predetermined route, maintaining a safe distance behind. After stopping to refuel, Donna took over driving to keep control over their timing. While traveling along a deserted highway, she pretended to feel ill and pulled over, claiming she needed to take some medication. At that moment, a black Volkswagen approached from behind. A man in ski goggles jumped out, ran to the passenger side where Ghulam was sitting, pointed a gun at him, and demanded his wallet. Ghulam complied without resistance, handed over his wallet. However, as soon as the attacker received the money, he shot Ghulam in the head and quickly returned to his vehicle, driving away rapidly. Ghulam died instantly from the gunshot. Donna then called emergency services, crying and screaming as she begged them to save her husband. She acted so convincingly like a distraught widow that, at first, no one suspected she could have been involved in the incident. Inconsistencies in the testimonies appeared quickly. Right from the initial interviews, it was evident that something was not right. Donna stated she didn't see the attacker or his vehicle, everything happened too quickly, and she was in shock. In contrast, her mother provided a different account. She claimed she saw both the shooter and the car clearly. According to her, the person who shot her son-in-law was a young black man driving a black Volkswagen. This assertion visibly upset Donna, who argued with her mother, insisting that she must have been mistaken. However, her mother remained firm and began to add more specific details. Donna contended that they had stopped the car because Ghulam requested it, while her mother claimed it was Donna who stopped the car, as illness. Investigators were also puzzled as to why the assailant only targeted one person while leaving 2 possible witnesses unharmed. 2 days after the incident, Dr. Ghulam's widow held a press conference where she answered reporters' questions with tears in her eyes. She made a heartfelt appeal to the public, urging anyone with information about the case to come forward and help with the investigation. Shortly after the press conference, the police received a phone call from a woman who claimed that Donna was actually the mastermind behind the incident and that she had been assisted by her lover, Damien Bradford. The caller also provided details such as the make and license plate number of Damien's car, as well as his home address. This caller considered herself to be Damien's fiancée. She had been closely monitoring the couple and shared all the information she had gathered. On the same day, police arrested Damien and searched his apartment. Although he had managed to get rid of the weapon, for some unknown reason, he kept the victim's wallet and brought it home. Inside the wallet, they found about $3,000 in cash, several bank cards belonging to Dr. Deromme, and a photo of Donna. Authorities also discovered clothes with small blood stains that matched the doctor's. Damien was arrested and taken into custody. He mistakenly believed that his wealthy lover would help him and somehow secure his release. However, Donna, fearing for her own safety, chose to stay silent, hoping that all the blame would fall on Damien, especially since the evidence against him was overwhelming. When prosecutors told Damien that he might face the death penalty, he decided to cooperate with them in exchange for a shorter sentence. He disclosed the entire plan, provided text messages and documents, including evidence that Donna had purchased the car he was driving. In July 2007, Damien pleaded guilty to the crime and testified in court, explaining all the details of the scheme. Because he cooperated, he was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison. Donna was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on September 21, 2007, for the murder for hire conviction, with an additional 360 months to run concurrently on the remaining charges. Despite Donna's numerous appeals, the court upheld the original sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Tallahassee Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Florida. After being released on supervised release in 2020, Damien Bradford was arrested again on July 29, 2022, following an altercation with state police at the Franklin Mini Mart in Aliquippa. During his struggle with an officer, Bradford fired a shot at the officer, hitting him in the leg. Damien was convicted of attempted murder and aggravated assault on the officer, sentenced to 36.5 to 73 years in state prison in November 2023. In December of that year, the district court added a consecutive 10-year sentence for violating the terms of his supervised release. As of press time, Damien is serving his sentence at the Albion State Correctional Institution, located in Albion, Pennsylvania. The murder of Dr. Deromme on May 13, 2005, shattered the illusion of a perfect life in Hermitage, Pennsylvania, exposing a chilling tale of addiction and betrayal. Donna Munda, 23 years younger than her devoted husband, succumbed to a dependency on painkillers and an obsessive affair with Damien Bradford, leading her to orchestrate Deromme's death for his $12 million estate. Deromme's kindness and medical legacy endure in the community's memory, marked by tributes in 2025, while his tragic end serves as a stark warning of addiction's power to corrupt and destroy, urging greater vigilance to prevent such devastations.